Hello there, and welcome back to Simply About Earth. Before we begin our journey tonight, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Maybe you're by a warm fire on a winter evening, or perhaps you're curious about our ancient past while the world sleeps around you. I'd love to know where this story finds you. Tonight, we're going to step far back in time into a world both familiar and utterly alien. Imagine a planet where vast forests stretched across continents, where stone was the most precious material anyone could possess, and where our own ancestors crouched by flickering fires, shaping tools with patient hands and carving their stories into cave walls with pigments mixed from earth and blood. This is the Stone Age, not a single moment, but an era lasting for millions of years, shaping humanity in ways we're still discovering. Before we begin, take a moment to settle in. Maybe you're listening late at night with the quiet hum of the world around you. Maybe you're just curious, searching for a calm place to drift while you learn. Either way, let's make this a slow journey, one where you don't need to rush or keep track of the clock. Because while the Stone Age transformed everything, it moved at a pace so gradual that entire lifetimes passed without anyone noticing the world was changing. The first thing to understand is that the Stone Age wasn't just one long primitive era. It was a cycle, a rhythm of technological advancement and cultural evolution that unfolded over millions of years. Humanity shifted from simple tool use to complex societies, driven by discoveries so profound they rewrote the very nature of what it meant to be human. These changes transformed not just how people lived, but how they thought, how they organized themselves, and how they understood their place in the world. But let's not start with the archaeology just yet. Picture instead the world itself. You're standing in what will one day be Europe or Africa or Asia. The horizon is not filled with cities or roads. Instead, there are endless forests, their canopies thick with leaves that filter the sunlight into dancing patterns on the forest floor. The air is rich with the scent of earth and growing things. And yet, despite the wilderness, the landscape isn't empty. Out in the clearings move bands of early humans, their forms still echoing their ancestral past but unmistakably different from any creature that had come before. They walk upright, their hands free to carry tools crafted from stone. Their eyes are alert, scanning the environment with an intelligence that seems to spark with possibility. They don't know they live in what we now call the Stone Age. For them, it's just life, a constant dance between survival and discovery. And this is the strange thing about deep time. It wasn't a primitive wasteland from which humanity slowly emerged. While technology was simple, life was rich, complex, and full of innovations that would echo through the millennia. The Earth during the Stone Age was not only wilder, it was more connected, more immediate, and full of lessons that shaped the human mind in ways we're only beginning to understand. The story begins long before modern humans dominated the landscape. For millions of years, our planet has been home to various human species, each one building upon the discoveries of those who came before. Scientists have pieced this together from fragments hidden in ancient sediments and cave floors. Stone by stone, bone by bone, these remnants give us a record of minds slowly awakening to their own potential. From them we know that the Stone Age didn't arrive all at once. It emerged gradually, innovations spreading slowly, then accelerating as knowledge accumulated like water pooling behind a dam. As the millennia passed, human ancestors learned to shape their environment. They discovered fire, crafted increasingly sophisticated tools, and developed languages that could carry ideas across generations. Even now, if you walk through parts of Africa, Europe, or Asia, you can still see these marks: caves bearing the handprints of our ancestors, stone tools scattered across ancient campsites, and rock formations that tell of minds reaching towards something greater than mere survival. But it wasn't only the land that changed. The climate shifted, forcing adaptation and migration. Ice ages came and went, forests expanded and contracted, and through it all, human innovation accelerated. Desert bloomed into grassland, then faded back to desert. Rivers changed course, Mountains rose and sea levels fluctuated. This wasn't just geological transformation, it was the forging of the human spirit, each environmental challenge demanding new solutions, new ways of thinking. Imagine standing at one of those ancient sites. The wind carries the scent of smoke from long-dead fires. The ground beneath your feet is littered with stone chips, the debris of countless tool-making sessions. Nearby you can see the remains of shelters built from branches and hide, their foundations still visible after thousands of years, and following it all, the invisible presence of human minds, thinking, planning, creating solutions to problems that had never been solved before. What's remarkable is how interconnected everything was. When one group discovered a new technique for knapping stone, the knowledge spread. Trade routes carried not just goods but ideas across vast distances. An innovation made in Africa might reach Europe within generations, transforming the lives of people who had never met its inventor. This vast network of human connection, the sharing of knowledge and culture covered much of the known world. Yet for all its scale and duration, the Stone Age wasn't static. Every few thousand years, new technologies emerged, better ways to make tools, to hunt, to process food, to create shelter. These advances didn't happen overnight. They were the result of countless experiments, failures, and gradual refinements, the patient work of hands and minds working together across generations. It was during these long millennia that humans began to flourish, learning to harness fire, to create art, to develop complex social structures, and eventually to step out of the Stone Age world entirely and into what we now call civilization. Even so, the fingerprints of that ancient era never disappeared. We see it not only in archaeological sites, but in ourselves, our capacity for innovation, our ability to adapt, even our social behaviors still carry traces of that time. And to truly understand the world we live in now, we have to walk back into that ancient landscape, to watch the stone chips fly and the fires burn, and to remember that humanity has been many things before it became what we recognize today. And so, let's keep walking into the past. The wind is stirring through the trees, and the horizon stretches wide with possibility. But there's more to see, because this is only the beginning, and the Stone Age has much more to show us. The transformation did not come suddenly. It crept across the landscape of human consciousness in slow, quiet waves so gradual that no single lifetime could have felt the full scope of the change. But over tens of thousands of years, the metamorphosis was unstoppable. It began with simple observations, the way certain stones broke in useful patterns, how fire could transform both food and materials, the recognition that tools could be improved through careful modification. It is almost impossible to imagine how different the world looked before this transformation began. Much of the landscape was wild, untouched by human engineering. Forests stretched unbroken across continents, rivers ran their natural courses, and animals moved in patterns undisturbed by human intervention. But as the millennia passed and each generation built upon the discoveries of the previous one, a slow revolution began, the awakening of human consciousness to its own creative potential. From those first tentative experiments with stone came the foundation of everything that followed. The discovery that certain rocks could be shaped into cutting edges led to better hunting tools. The mastery of fire enabled new methods of food preparation and protection. Each innovation opened new possibilities, and each possibility demanded new solutions. It was a cascade of discovery that would fundamentally alter not just how humans lived, but how they thought about living. The Great Transformation did not simply appear overnight. It advanced like the seasons, slowly, then with gathering momentum. At its height, human innovation was reshaping entire landscapes. People learned to modify their environment, to create semi-permanent settlements, and to develop technologies that would seem almost magical to their earlier ancestors. The capacity for abstract thought, for planning beyond immediate needs, for creating beauty alongside utility, all of these emerged during this crucial period. The tools themselves changed as human understanding deepened. When so much energy was invested in perfecting stone implements, artisans developed techniques of extraordinary sophistication. They learned to predict how stone would fracture, to prepare cores for maximum efficiency, and to create implements so precisely crafted that modern archaeologists can barely replicate them. The knowledge required was vast, an understanding of geology, physics, and craftsmanship that took generations to accumulate. The mind itself evolved as these changes took hold. As people developed more complex tools, they also developed more complex ways of thinking. Language became richer, social structures more elaborate, and the capacity for symbolic thought expanded dramatically. The ability to imagine possibilities that didn't yet exist became one of humanity's defining characteristics. This feedback loop between tool use and cognitive development created an acceleration that continues to this day. And yet, even in this expanding world, life endured much as it always had. Plants and animals adapted to human presence, some flourishing in the modified environments people created, others retreating to more remote areas. The human transformation was profound, but it was also part of the larger story of life on Earth, a story of constant adaptation and change. To walk that ancient landscape would have been to witness the birth of human culture. You would see small groups gathered around carefully tended fires, their hands busy with the patient work of tool creation. Children would watch intently as adults demonstrated techniques passed down through countless generations. The very air would hum with concentration and purpose. But this was not only about survival. Even in the earlier Stone Age communities, there were signs of something more: decorative elements, added to tools that served no practical purpose, the careful burial of the dead with grave goods, and the first tentative experiments with art. These suggest that even our earliest ancestors possessed an inner life, a sense of meaning that extended beyond the immediate necessities of existence. Yet, for all their innovations, Stone Age peoples remained connected to the natural world in ways that modern humans can barely comprehend. They read the landscape like a book, understanding the seasonal movements of animals, the properties of plants, the behavior of weather patterns. This knowledge was not academic. It was vital, practical, and deeply integrated into every aspect of daily life. The scale of this transformation is hard to grasp. A single innovation, say the development of hafted tools, might spread across continents over the course of centuries, transforming the lives of millions of people who would never know the name of its inventor. Each advance built upon previous ones, creating a momentum that would eventually carry humanity far beyond the Stone Age world. If you could have stood at the center of one of those early innovations, you would have felt the weight of history shifting beneath your feet. Not in any dramatic way. The daily routine would have seemed much the same, but in the patient repetition of improved techniques, in the gradually expanding possibilities, in the slow accumulation of knowledge, the future was being written stone by stone. And so the stage was set. A world in constant flux, human minds awakening to their own potential, and innovations spreading like ripples across the vast ocean of human experience. From this foundation, the true story of the Stone Age would emerge, one patient discovery at a time. When humanity first began to shape stone into tools, it wasn't only the rocks that seemed immense. The implications of what they were creating would ripple through time in ways that could not have been imagined. This was an age of awakening, shaped by a world both demanding and rich with possibility, where intelligence itself was becoming humanity's greatest survival strategy. The great innovations came slowly at first. Imagine endless landscapes, wild and unmodified but alive with the movement of human minds beginning to grasp their own potential. Early tool makers worked in patient silence, striking stone against stone with careful precision, their hands learning the secrets hidden in the heart of rock. These were not rare, solitary discoveries. They emerged from communities, from the accumulated wisdom of countless individuals working together across generations. Alongside them lived a world still dominated by natural forces. Massive herbivores grazed in herds that stretched to the horizon. Aurochs, the wild ancestors of cattle, deer in vast numbers, and in some regions the great elephants and rhinoceros that still roamed free. But the Stone Age humans were not merely observers of this abundance. They were active participants, their growing toolkit making them increasingly effective hunters and gatherers. But the stone tools were only part of this awakening world. The landscapes themselves were alive with innovation. Forests provided raw materials for countless purposes: wood for spears and shelters, bark for containers, fibers for cordage. Rivers offered not just water and fish, but transportation routes that connected distant communities. Every element of the natural world became a resource for minds learning to see possibility everywhere. Hunters developed new strategies that required unprecedented cooperation. Groups learned to work together in complex, coordinated hunts that could bring down animals many times their size. They created tools specialized for different purposes: points for piercing, scrapers for hide preparation, cutting implements for butchering. Each tool represented not just a solution to a practical problem, but a leap in abstract thinking. Yet, for all their growing sophistication, Stone Age peoples lived within natural cycles in ways that modern humans find difficult to imagine. They followed seasonal migrations, understood the subtle signs that predicted weather changes, and possessed encyclopedic knowledge of local ecosystems. This wasn't primitive thinking. It was a different kind of intelligence, one perfectly adapted to a world where survival depended on reading the landscape with extraordinary precision. The relationship between humans and animals during this period was complex and intimate. Hunters didn't simply kill for food, they used every part of their prey. Bones became tools, hide became clothing and shelter, sinews became cordage. Nothing was wasted because waste meant death. This efficiency bred a deep respect for the animals that sustained human life, a relationship that would echo through mythology and spirituality for millennia to come. Predators, too, played their role in shaping human development. Cave bears denned in the same shelters humans sought. Large cats stalked the edges of human settlements. Wolves competed for the same prey. These encounters forced humans to become more strategic, more aware, more capable of working together against common threats. The constant presence of danger sharpened human wits and strengthened social bonds. But perhaps most remarkably, it was during this period that humans began to create, not just tools for survival, but objects of beauty and meaning. They carved figures from ivory and stone, created jewelry from shells and teeth, and began the long tradition of decorating their tools with patterns that served no practical purpose except to please the eye. Even the simple act of controlling fire represented a quantum leap in human capability. Fire provided warmth, protection, and the ability to cook food, but it also extended the day, creating time for social interaction after dark. Around those fires, stories were told, knowledge was shared, and the complex social structures that would define human civilization began to take shape. This was not a world made for comfort. It was a world that demanded constant adaptation, innovation, and cooperation. And in meeting those demands, humans transformed themselves from clever animals into something unprecedented, beings capable of imagining and creating realities that had never existed before. To stand in that ancient world would have been to witness the birth of human consciousness as we know it. The careful percussion of stone on stone, the patient preparation of hides, the slow accumulation of knowledge from one generation to the next, all of it pointing toward a future that no one could have imagined but everyone helped to create. And as these early innovations spread across the landscape, carried by migrating bands and passed down through generations, they set in motion changes that would eventually transform the entire planet. The Stone Age was not humanity's beginning, it was humanity's awakening. Now, as we move deeper into this ancient world, we turn to the very foundation that made it all possible, the stones themselves, and the revolution that occurred when human hands first learned to shape them with intention and skill. The stone was never silent, even before humans learned to work with it. Rock had been telling stories for millions of years, stories written in layers of sediment, in the slow transformation of minerals, in the patient work of water and wind. But when human hands first took up stone with the intention of making it into something new, the conversation between mind and matter began in earnest. At the heart of this transformation was flint, a type of chert that fractured in predictable ways, its broken edges sharp enough to cut through hide and bone. But flint was not the only stone that captured human attention. Obsidian, formed in the heart of volcanoes, could be worked into blades sharper than modern surgical steel. Quartzite provided durability for heavy-duty tools. Each type of stone had its own personality, its own possibilities and limitations. The first toolmakers were not working randomly. They understood their materials at a level that approached intuition. They could look at a piece of raw stone and see the tools hidden within it. They knew how to strike at just the right angle, with just the right force to produce the flake they needed. This knowledge was not written down. It lived in their hands, passed from teacher to student through thousands of repetitions. The process itself was almost meditative. A skilled napper would begin with a core, a carefully selected piece of stone with the right shape and internal structure. Each strike was deliberate, removing flakes in a predetermined sequence. The goal was not just to create a sharp edge, but to do so efficiently, with minimal waste. A master craftsperson could turn a single core into dozens of useful tools. But these tools were not crude implements. Archaeological sites have revealed Stone Age artifacts of breathtaking sophistication, spear points so thin and perfectly balanced they seem to float in the hand, scrapers with edges so precisely controlled they could remove hair from hide without cutting through the skin beneath, and composite tools that combined multiple materials into implements of remarkable effectiveness. The social implications of stone tool technology were profound. Knowledge of good stone sources became valuable information that could determine the survival of entire groups. Trade networks developed to move high-quality raw materials across vast distances. Obsidian from volcanic regions has been found hundreds of miles from its source, evidence of exchange systems that connected distant communities. Specialization began to emerge. While everyone knew the basics of stoneworking, some individuals showed particular aptitude and devoted more time to perfecting their skills. These early craftspeople became valuable members of their communities, their expertise essential for group survival. The social status associated with skilled tool-making may have been among the first forms of specialized occupation in human society. The tools themselves tell stories of human ingenuity. Projectile points show evidence of repeated resharpening, indicating that hunters maintained their equipment with great care. Scrapers bear the microscopic traces of use wear that reveals exactly how they were employed. Even broken tools tell stories. Many show evidence of attempts at repair, suggesting that these implements were too valuable to discard lightly. Yet stone tools were not created in isolation. They were part of integrated technological systems that included wooden handles, plant fiber bindings, and other organic materials that rarely survive in the archaeological record. A Stone Age spear was not just a pointed stick. It was a carefully engineered system designed to transfer kinetic energy efficiently from the thrower to the target. The cognitive demands of stone tool production were extraordinary. Creating a complex implement required the ability to hold a mental model of the finished product while working through dozens of intermediate steps. It demanded understanding of three-dimensional geometry, knowledge of material properties, and the motor skills to execute precise movements consistently. These are the same mental abilities that underlie modern engineering and design. Working stone also required patience on a scale that modern life rarely demands. A single tool might represent hours or even days of careful work. Mistakes couldn't be easily corrected. A poorly placed strike could ruin hours of progress. This fostered a culture of deliberation and forethought that would become central to human problem-solving. The waste products of stone tool production, the thousands of flakes and fragments scattered around ancient campsites, provide intimate glimpses into the learning process. Archaeologists can identify the work of beginners by the irregular flakes and broken attempts. They can trace the progression of skill development in the debris patterns around long-term habitation sites. But perhaps most remarkably, stone tool technology was not static. Over hundreds of thousands of years, the techniques became increasingly sophisticated. What began as simple choppers and scrapers evolved into elegant projectile points, composite tools, and specialized implements designed for specific tasks. This represents one of the longest continuous technological traditions in human history. The relationship between human intelligence and stone technology was reciprocal. Better tools enabled new survival strategies, which in turn selected for enhanced cognitive abilities. The feedback loop between material culture and mental development drove the accelerating pace of human innovation. Each generation built upon the achievements of their predecessors, adding refinements and innovations that would be passed down to their children. Even the process of learning to make tools had profound implications for human development. Children learn by watching and imitating adults, gradually developing the motor skills and pattern recognition abilities that successful napping required. This extended apprenticeship period may have been crucial in the development of human social learning abilities. The mastery of stone tool technology represented humanity's first systematic attempt to impose order on the material world. It was the beginning of engineering, of design thinking, of the long process through which humans learn to shape their environment rather than simply adapt to it. Every computer chip, every spacecraft, every work of architecture traces its conceptual lineage back to those first careful strikes of stone against stone. To hold an ancient stone tool is to touch a direct link to the minds that made it. The edge that was sharp enough to butcher a mammoth, the point that brought down running game, the scraper that prepared the hides that kept our ancestors warm, all bear the unmistakable mark of human intention, human skill, and human ingenuity. And as these stone technologies spread across the continents, carried by migrating bands and refined by countless individual innovations, they laid the foundation for everything that would follow. The Stone Age was not just humanity's technological infancy. It was the period when humans learned to think like engineers, to plan like architects, and to innovate like inventors. From this foundation of shaped stone and accumulated knowledge, we now turn to one of humanity's most transformative discoveries, the harnessing of fire, and the profound changes it brought to human life and consciousness. Beneath the endless expanse of the Stone Age world, life had found ways to flourish that would seem almost impossible today. This was not a primitive struggle for bare survival. It was a rich, complex ecosystem of human culture that had learned to extract abundance from what might appear to be a harsh and unforgiving environment. To understand this world, we have to see beyond our modern assumptions about what constitutes progress and recognize the sophisticated adaptations that allowed Stone Age peoples to thrive. The key was knowledge, vast, intricate, precise knowledge of the natural world that was carried not in books, but in human memory. A successful hunter knew the behavior patterns of dozens of animal species, could read weather signs days in advance, and possessed a mental map of resources that extended across hundreds of square miles. This wasn't simple familiarity. It was encyclopedic understanding that took decades to develop and was constantly refined through experience. Plant knowledge was equally sophisticated. Gatherers could identify hundreds of edible species, knew when each would be ready for harvest, and understood complex processing techniques that could transform inedible materials into nutritious food. They knew which plants provided medicines, which could be used for tool making, and which offered raw materials for clothing, shelter, and other necessities. This botanical expertise rivaled that of modern scientists and was essential for group survival. The social structures that supported this knowledge were intricate and robust. Information was shared freely within groups, with elders teaching younger members through patient demonstration and storytelling. Specialized knowledge, the location of good stone sources, the seasonal movements of game, the properties of rare plants, was preserved through oral traditions that could maintain their accuracy across generations. Seasonal migrations were precisely orchestrated events that required coordination among multiple groups. Families and clans would gather at predetermined locations, following routes that had been established over thousands of years. These gatherings served multiple purposes. They allowed for the exchange of goods and information, provided opportunities for young people to find marriage partners outside their immediate group, and ensured that vital knowledge was shared across the broader community. The temporary settlements created during these migrations were marvels of efficient engineering. Shelters could be constructed quickly from available materials, organized in patterns that maximized both privacy and security. Communal spaces were designed for specific activities: tool making, food preparation, storytelling, and ritual observance. These camps might exist for only a few weeks, but they functioned as complete communities with their own internal organization and governance. Resource management was both sophisticated and sustainable. Groups had detailed knowledge of how their activities affected local ecosystems and adjusted their practices accordingly. Hunting was regulated through social customs that prevented overharvesting. Gathering areas were managed to ensure continued productivity. Fire was used strategically to maintain the landscapes that supported both game animals and useful plants. The cognitive demands of this lifestyle were extraordinary. Individuals had to maintain mental maps of vast territories, track the complex interactions among multiple ecological variables, and make decisions that balanced immediate needs against long-term consequences. These are the same analytical abilities that modern humans associate with systems thinking and strategic planning. Tool systems were integrated and efficient. Every implement served multiple purposes, and the total toolkit of a group represented thousands of years of evolutionary refinement. A single well-made spear point might be resharpened dozens of times, gradually changing shape as it was modified for different uses. When it finally broke beyond repair, the fragments would be recycled into other tools. Food processing techniques were remarkably sophisticated. Many plants require complex preparation to become edible: grinding, leaching, fermenting, or cooking in specific ways. Meat was preserved through smoking, drying, and other methods that could extend its useful life for months. Fat was rendered and stored as a concentrated energy source. Nothing edible was wasted, and non-food parts of animals and plants were transformed into tools, clothing, and shelter materials. The pace of life was different, not slower, but more integrated with natural rhythms. Activities were timed to take advantage of seasonal opportunities and environmental conditions. Long-term planning extended across multiple years, with groups positioning themselves to take advantage of predictable resource fluctuations. This required a temporal perspective that encompassed not just individual lifespans but generational cycles. Social cooperation reached levels of complexity that required sophisticated communication systems. Hunts involving large groups required precise coordination that could only be achieved through shared understanding of tactics, roles, and timing. The division of labor within groups was nuanced, taking advantage of individual skills and preferences while ensuring that essential tasks were completed efficiently. Conflict resolution mechanisms were essential for group survival. Disputes over resources, leadership, or social relationships had to be managed without destroying the cooperation that everyone depended on. This led to the development of sophisticated social institutions, councils of elders, formalized reciprocity systems, and ritual practices that reinforced group cohesion. The relationship with the natural world was not one of conquest or control, but of participation and partnership. Humans saw themselves as part of the ecosystem, not separate from it. This perspective influenced every aspect of life, from hunting practices that honored the animals that provided sustenance to land management techniques that enhanced rather than depleted natural productivity. Art and creativity flourished within this framework. Cave paintings, carved figures, decorative objects, and elaborate burial goods all testify to the presence of rich aesthetic and spiritual traditions. These weren't luxury activities pursued only when survival needs were met. They were integral parts of a worldview that found meaning and beauty in the relationship between human consciousness and the natural world. The knowledge systems that supported this way of life were dynamic and adaptive. New discoveries were constantly being made, tested, and either incorporated into traditional practices or discarded. Innovation was continuous but gradual, with each generation adding small refinements to the accumulated wisdom of their ancestors. Perhaps most remarkably, this entire complex system operated without centralized authority or formal institutions. Coordination was achieved through shared culture, mutual dependence, and sophisticated social agreements that were maintained through peer pressure and internalized values. Leadership was situational and temporary, with individuals taking charge based on their expertise in particular areas. To live in this world would have been to experience human community in its most fundamental form, small groups of people bound together by necessity, shared purpose, and intimate knowledge of each other's capabilities and limitations. Survival depended not just on individual skill, but on the group's ability to function as an integrated unit. And yet, for all its sophistication, this was still a world balanced on the edge of uncertainty. Environmental changes, resource fluctuations, and unpredictable events could quickly transform abundance into scarcity. The response to such challenges required not just technical knowledge, but the psychological resilience and social flexibility that would become defining characteristics of human nature. From this foundation of adaptive culture and sustainable technology, we now turn to examine the crucial role that fire played in transforming not just how humans lived, but how they thought about themselves and their place in the world. When fire first came under human control, it was more than the domestication of a natural force. It was the beginning of humanity's long relationship with technology that would reshape both the external world and the internal landscape of human consciousness. No other discovery would prove as transformative, as fundamental to human development, or as symbolic of humanity's unique capacity to harness natural forces for its own purposes. The discovery of fire control didn't happen overnight. Archaeological evidence suggests a long apprenticeship period, during which early humans learned to maintain fires, started by lightning strikes or volcanic activity. They studied the behavior of natural fires, learned which materials burned well, and gradually developed the skills necessary to keep flames alive for extended periods. This phase might have lasted tens of thousands of years, with knowledge slowly accumulating across generations. The breakthrough came with the development of fire-making techniques that didn't depend on natural sources. The friction method, spinning a hardwood stick against a softwood base until the accumulated heat ignited dry tinder, required both technical knowledge and considerable skill. It demanded understanding of wood properties, awareness of moisture content, and the manual dexterity to maintain consistent pressure and speed for the time needed to generate combustion. Fire-making tools became some of the most carefully maintained items in the Stone Age toolkit. Fire drills were crafted from specific wood species, shaped to precise dimensions, and protected from moisture with obsessive care. Tinder was collected and processed to ensure maximum flammability. Dry grass, bark fiber, and other materials that could catch a spark and nurse it into flame. These materials were often carried in specially made containers that kept them dry and accessible. The social implications of fire control were profound. Fire became the center of human social life, the focal point around which communities organized themselves. The evening gathering around the fire created time and space for activities that would define human culture, storytelling, music, the teaching of skills, and the development of the complex social relationships that bind groups together. But fire was more than a social catalyst. It was a technological multiplier that enabled dozens of other innovations. Cooking transformed nutrition, making previously inedible foods digestible and increasing the caloric value of many others. This improved nutrition supported brain development and may have been crucial in the evolution of human intelligence. The regular use of cooked food also changed human anatomy, allowing for smaller teeth and shorter digestive systems. Fire enabled the development of new tools and techniques. Heat could be used to harden wooden spear points, making them more effective weapons. It could split stone in controlled ways, providing a new method of tool production. Fire could hollow out logs to create containers, shape wood through controlled burning, and prepare plant materials for weaving and cordage production. The mastery of fire also extended human geographical range. With reliable heat sources, humans could survive in climates that would otherwise be lethal. This enabled the colonization of colder regions and may have been essential for the global spread of human populations. Fire made it possible to live in caves that were too cold for occupation without artificial heat, expanding the available shelter options. Light from fires extended the useful day, creating time for activities that couldn't be performed safely in darkness. This had enormous implications for human productivity and social development. Evening hours could be devoted to tool making, food preparation, social interaction, and the transmission of knowledge from one generation to the next. The firelit evening became humanity's first classroom. Fire also provided protection from predators. Most large carnivores avoided fire, making camps with well-maintained fires relatively safe from nighttime attacks. This security allowed for better rest and reduced the stress associated with constant vigilance. It also enabled humans to occupy territories that might otherwise be too dangerous due to predator populations. The psychological impact of fire control should not be underestimated. Fire represented humanity's first major victory over natural forces, the first clear evidence that human intelligence could master environmental challenges. This may have been crucial in developing the confidence and ambition that would drive further technological innovation. The ability to create fire at will made humans feel less vulnerable and more in control of their destiny. Ritual and spiritual practices developed around fire use. Fire became associated with purification, transformation, and communication with spiritual forces. Many of the world's oldest religious traditions incorporate fire as a sacred element, suggesting that the spiritual significance of fire extends back to the earliest periods of human culture. The maintenance of fire required new forms of social organization. Someone had to tend the fire, feed it fuel, and ensure it didn't go out. This created new responsibilities and social roles. The person who maintained the group's fire held a position of enormous responsibility. Their negligence could mean the difference between warmth and freezing, safety and vulnerability, cooked food and raw meat. Fire-making knowledge became one of the most valuable skills a person could possess. Those who were particularly adept at making fire under difficult conditions, in wet weather, with poor materials, or when time was critical, gained status and respect within their groups. This expertise was carefully guarded and passed down through formal apprenticeships. The control of fire also enabled new forms of landscape management. Humans learned to use fire strategically to clear underbrush, encourage the growth of useful plants, and create the open environments that supported game animals. This was an early form of environmental engineering that increased the productivity of human territories. Trade relationships developed around fire-related materials. High-quality tinder, specially prepared fire-making tools, and rare materials that burned with particular characteristics or aromas became valuable trade goods. These exchanges connected distant groups and facilitated the spread of fire-related innovations. The technical challenges of fire management drove innovation in related areas. Containers were needed to store and transport fire-making materials. Shelters had to be designed to accommodate fires safely while providing adequate ventilation. New tools were developed for moving coals, controlling airflow, and managing large fires. Each solution created new possibilities and new challenges. Perhaps most importantly, fire control demonstrated that humans could transform natural processes for their own benefit. This was a conceptual breakthrough that would underlie all future technological development. The same mental processes that enabled fire mastery, observation, experimentation, the systematic testing of hypotheses, would be applied to countless other challenges. The social rituals that developed around fire use created some of humanity's earliest formal ceremonies. The lighting of fires, the sharing of fire between groups, and the maintenance of perpetual flames all became occasions for community bonding and the reinforcement of social values. These practices helped maintain group cohesion and identity across generations. Fire also enabled the development of more sophisticated food storage and preservation techniques. Smoking meat and fish extended their useful life dramatically, reducing dependence on day-to-day hunting success. This food security allowed for longer stays in favorable locations and reduced the risks associated with seasonal resource fluctuations. The heat provided by fires enabled craft activities that required warm, dry conditions. Many forms of basketry, leatherworking, and fiber production were much easier to accomplish near a fire. This expanded the range of useful objects that could be created and improved their quality and durability. To master fire was to master one of nature's most powerful and dangerous forces. It required courage, intelligence, and persistence. Those who achieved this mastery didn't just gain a useful technology, they gained a new relationship with the natural world, one based on active participation rather than passive adaptation. The smoke from human fires began to mark the landscape, creating the first clear signs of human presence visible from great distances. This smoke carried messages: the location of friendly camps, the presence of successful hunters, the warmth of human companionship in an often hostile world. And as fire-making knowledge spread across the human populations of Africa, Asia, and eventually Europe, it laid the foundation for all the technological revolutions that would follow. The control of fire was humanity's first great engineering achievement, and the confidence and knowledge it provided would drive the innovations that eventually carried humans out of the Stone Age and into the modern world. From the warmth and safety of these ancient fires, we now turn to examine the social structures that grew up around them, the complex communities that firelight made possible, and the relationships that would define human society for millennia to come. Around the flickering light of controlled fire, the first complex human societies began to take shape. These were not primitive bands struggling for survival, but sophisticated communities with intricate social structures, specialized roles, and cultural traditions that could maintain their coherence across generations. The evening gathering around the fire became humanity's first parliament, school, and theater, a space where the essential work of civilization was accomplished through the patient accumulation of shared knowledge and mutual understanding. The physical arrangement of a Stone Age camp reflected deep principles of social organization. The fire occupied the central position, with dwelling areas arranged around it in patterns that balanced privacy with community access. The most skilled toolmakers often positioned themselves where others could observe their work, facilitating the transmission of technical knowledge. Elders might occupy slightly elevated positions that allowed them to address the entire group during evening discussions. Leadership in these communities was fluid and situational. Different individuals took charge depending on the task at hand. The best tracker might lead during hunting expeditions, while the most skilled firekeeper took responsibility during bad weather. This distributed leadership model prevented the concentration of power while ensuring that decisions were made by those with the greatest relevant expertise. The education of children was a community responsibility that extended far beyond the nuclear family. Every adult contributed to the development of young people, teaching them the skills, knowledge, and values necessary for group survival. This wasn't formal instruction, but constant, patient demonstration and correction that continued throughout childhood and adolescence. Storytelling served multiple crucial functions beyond entertainment. Stories preserved important information about distant places, rare events, and historical experiences that might be vital for survival. They encoded complex ecological knowledge in memorable narratives that could be passed down accurately across generations. Traditional stories also reinforced social values and provided guidance for handling difficult situations. The evening hours around the fire became humanity's first laboratory for developing language and abstract thinking. Complex ideas had to be communicated clearly for group decisions to be effective. Technical knowledge had to be explained precisely for skills to be transmitted successfully. This constant practice in verbal communication drove the evolution of increasingly sophisticated language capabilities. Conflict resolution required elaborate social mechanisms because groups couldn't afford to lose members to unresolved disputes. Mediation techniques, ritualized competitions, and formal reconciliation procedures all developed to manage tensions before they destroyed group cohesion. Many of these practices involved the entire community and served to reinforce shared values while resolving specific conflicts. Trade relationships between groups created networks of mutual obligation and shared interest that extended across vast territories. These relationships weren't just economic, they included agreements about territory use, mutual aid during emergencies, and the exchange of information about resources and dangers. Marriage alliances between groups were often formalized during trade gatherings. Specialized knowledge began to emerge as some individuals devoted extra time and attention to particular skills. The best toolmakers, the most successful hunters, and the most knowledgeable healers all developed expertise that was valued by the broader community. This specialization increased group efficiency while creating social roles that would evolve into more formal occupations. Religious and spiritual practices provided frameworks for understanding natural forces and human experiences that couldn't be explained through practical knowledge alone. These belief systems helped maintain group morale during difficult periods and provided meaning that transcended immediate survival needs. Ritual practices reinforced community bonds and created shared experiences that strengthened group identity. The care of elderly and disabled community members represented one of humanity's earliest expressions of moral philosophy. Groups that could afford to support non-productive members demonstrated a level of social development that went beyond simple survival calculations. This care was provided not out of sentiment, but from recognition that elders possessed irreplaceable knowledge and that mutual aid was essential for long-term group survival. Territorial agreements between neighboring groups required sophisticated diplomatic skills and mutual recognition of legitimate interests. These negotiations established hunting boundaries, gathering rights, and passage agreements that prevented conflicts over resources. Violation of these agreements could lead to warfare, but successful negotiations created stable relationships that benefited all parties. The sexual division of labor was flexible and practical rather than rigidly ideological. While certain tasks were typically performed by men or women, individual aptitude and group needs took precedence over strict gender roles. Successful groups utilized the skills of all members effectively, regardless of traditional role assignments. Seasonal gatherings brought together multiple groups for trade, social interaction, and the resolution of intergroup disputes. These events were carefully organized affairs that followed traditional protocols developed over centuries. They provided opportunities for young people to find marriage partners outside their immediate community and for the exchange of goods that weren't available locally. The development of property concepts balanced individual ownership rights with community needs. Personal tools and weapons were clearly owned by individuals, but resources like water sources and major hunting grounds were considered communal property. Food was shared according to complex rules that ensured everyone received adequate nutrition while rewarding successful hunters and gatherers. Medical knowledge was accumulated and preserved through careful observation of what worked and what didn't. Herbal remedies, surgical techniques, and therapeutic practices were developed through trial and error over many generations. This knowledge was typically held by specialists who trained apprentices and shared information with healers from other groups. The treatment of death reflected sophisticated beliefs about human nature and the continuation of identity beyond physical existence. Burial practices often included grave goods that suggested belief in an afterlife, while mourning rituals helped communities process grief and maintain social cohesion after losing valued members. Child-rearing practices balanced individual development with community needs. Children were encouraged to explore their interests and develop their particular talents, but they were also taught the essential skills and knowledge that everyone needed for survival. The transition to adulthood was often marked by formal ceremonies that recognized new responsibilities and privileges. Food sharing followed complex rules that balanced fairness with incentives for productive effort. Successful hunters were honored and received choice portions, but everyone was fed regardless of their contribution. This system maintained morale while encouraging effort and skill development. The maintenance of group knowledge required sophisticated memory techniques and constant repetition. Important information was embedded in songs, stories, and ritual practices that made it easier to remember and harder to distort over time. The most knowledgeable individuals were respected as living libraries whose memories preserved the accumulated wisdom of their people. Environmental management reflected deep understanding of ecological relationships and long-term thinking about resource sustainability. Groups developed practices that maintained the productivity of their territories over many generations, balancing current needs against future requirements. To live in these communities was to experience human social life in its most fundamental form, relationships based on mutual dependence, shared purpose, and intimate knowledge of each person's capabilities and limitations. Success required not just individual skill, but the ability to function effectively as part of an integrated social unit. The fire that brought these people together each evening was more than a source of warmth and light. It was the symbol and catalyst of human civilization, the focal point around which the essential work of community building was accomplished through patient conversation, shared experience, and mutual recognition of common humanity. From these firelit communities with their sophisticated social structures, we now turn to examine the material culture they created, the tools, weapons, and artistic achievements that reveal the depth and complexity of Stone Age human intelligence. The minds that gathered around those ancient fires were not content with mere survival. Even in the midst of lives that demanded constant attention to practical necessities, Stone Age humans found time and energy to create objects of remarkable beauty and sophistication. These weren't crude implements hastily made for immediate use, but carefully crafted tools that revealed planning, patience, and an aesthetic sense that went far beyond utilitarian requirements. The stone tools that have survived tell only part of the story. For every implement of stone, there were dozens made from organic materials that have long since decayed, wooden spears with perfectly balanced shafts, containers woven from plant fibers with extraordinary skill, and composite tools that combined multiple materials into implements of remarkable effectiveness. The archaeological record gives us only glimpses of material cultures that rivaled anything produced by later civilizations. Projectile points represent some of the finest achievements of Stone Age craftsmanship. These implements required not only technical skill but deep understanding of ballistics, aerodynamics, and materials science. A well-made spear point had to be sharp enough to penetrate hide and bone, balanced to fly straight, and durable enough to withstand the tremendous forces of impact. Creating such tools required knowledge that took lifetimes to accumulate. The hafting of stone tools, attaching them to wooden handles with bindings of sinew or plant fiber, represented a crucial technological breakthrough. Hafted tools multiplied human strength and precision, enabling tasks that would have been impossible with handheld implements alone. The engineering challenges involved in creating secure, durable hafting systems were considerable and required sophisticated understanding of stress distribution and materials properties. Composite tools that combined different materials to take advantage of their respective strengths marked a major advance in technological thinking. A spear thrower, for instance, might incorporate a wooden lever, a bone hook, and stone weights, each contributing specific properties to the overall function of the tool. These implements required systems thinking and the ability to visualize complex mechanical relationships. Microliths, tiny stone blades that were hafted together to create cutting edges, represented one of the most sophisticated approaches to tool design in the prehistoric world. These implements allowed toolmakers to create long, sharp edges from small pieces of stone, maximizing the utility of limited raw materials. The precision required to create effective microliths rivaled that of modern manufacturing. Grinding and polishing techniques developed during the later Stone Age enabled the creation of tools with smooth, precise surfaces that couldn't be achieved through knapping alone. Ground stone axes could cut through wood more efficiently than chipped implements, while polished surfaces reduced friction and improved tool performance. These techniques required new types of abrasives and finishing materials. The production of fire-making tools demanded extraordinary precision and consistency. Fire drills had to be shaped to exact specifications, with precisely calculated dimensions that optimized the friction characteristics needed for reliable ignition. The manufacturing tolerances were often less than a millimeter, demonstrating remarkable manual skill and quality control. Clothing production involved complex processing of animal hides and plant fibers that required both chemical knowledge and mechanical skill. Tanning hides to make them soft and durable involved understanding of how various plant and animal substances affected leather properties. Spinning fibers into thread and weaving them into fabric required sophisticated mechanical devices and precise timing. Containers represented one of the most essential and challenging categories of Stone Age technology. Waterproof baskets, hide bags, wooden bowls, and other storage devices had to be both functional and durable. Many involved complex construction techniques that combined multiple materials and required precise fitting of components. The engineering challenges were substantial, particularly for containers that had to hold liquids. Adhesives and binding materials were crucial components of Stone Age technology that required sophisticated chemistry and materials science. Pine pitch, animal glues, and plant-based binders all had specific properties that made them suitable for particular applications. Understanding how to prepare, apply, and maintain these materials was essential for creating durable composite tools. Musical instruments provide evidence of aesthetic and cultural development that went far beyond survival requirements. Bone flutes, percussion instruments, and resonating devices all demonstrate sophisticated understanding of acoustics and materials properties. The time and skill invested in creating these instruments reflects the importance of music and rhythm in Stone Age social life. Decorative arts flourished despite the practical demands of Stone Age life. Personal ornaments, decorated tools, and artistic objects all testify to the presence of aesthetic values and symbolic thinking that characterized human consciousness even in its earliest technological phases. These objects often required enormous investments of time and skill for purposes that had nothing to do with immediate survival. The production of pigments for body painting in cave art involved complex chemical processes and sophisticated knowledge of mineral properties. Different colors required different source materials and preparation techniques. The stability and permanence of these pigments, many cave paintings remain vivid after tens of thousands of years, demonstrates remarkable chemical knowledge. Sewing technology enabled the creation of fitted clothing that provided much better protection from the elements than simple wrapped hides. Bone needles, sinew thread, and precisely cut pattern pieces all contributed to garment construction that was both functional and sophisticated. The tailoring skills demonstrated in preserved clothing fragments rival those of much later periods. Storage and preservation techniques allowed Stone Age peoples to maintain food supplies and raw materials over extended periods. Sophisticated knowledge of drying, smoking, fermentation, and other preservation methods enabled groups to smooth out seasonal fluctuations in resource availability. These techniques often required precise timing and environmental control. Transportation technology included sleds, carrying frames, and possibly early boats that enabled the movement of heavy loads over long distances. These devices had to be strong enough to carry substantial weights while remaining light enough to be transported when not in use. The engineering challenges involved in their construction were considerable. Hunting technology extended far beyond simple spears and included traps, nets, pitfalls, and drive systems that required sophisticated understanding of animal behavior and mechanical principles. Many of these hunting methods involved complex preparations and group coordination that demanded both technical knowledge and social organization. The maintenance and repair of tools was as important as their initial creation. Stone Age peoples developed sophisticated techniques for resharpening worn edges, replacing broken components, and modifying tools for new purposes. This conservation of valuable implements reflects both practical necessity and deep respect for the skill and effort invested in their creation. Standardization of tool designs within and between communities indicates the presence of shared technical traditions and communication networks that maintained quality standards across wide geographical areas. This standardization facilitated trade, reduced learning time for new techniques, and ensured that replacement parts and components were interchangeable. Quality control in Stone Age manufacturing was maintained through apprenticeship systems that passed detailed technical knowledge from master craftspeople to students. The consistency and excellence of many surviving artifacts demonstrates that these educational systems were highly effective in maintaining and improving technical standards over long periods. To examine these artifacts today is to see evidence of minds that were thoroughly modern in their capacity for innovation, planning, and aesthetic appreciation. The technical achievements of Stone Age peoples in many areas weren't surpassed until the development of modern industrial techniques. Their integration of function and beauty, their sophisticated understanding of materials' properties, and their ability to create complex tools from simple raw materials all testify to intellectual capabilities that fully equal our own. The tools and technologies they created weren't just instruments for survival, they were expressions of human creativity and intelligence that demonstrate the presence of minds capable of seeing beyond immediate needs to possibilities that existed only in imagination, until patient skill and accumulated knowledge brought them into being. From these achievements in material culture, we turn now to examine one of the most mysterious and compelling aspects of Stone Age life: the emergence of art, ritual, and symbolic thinking that reveal the deepest levels of human consciousness. In the depths of caves scattered across Europe, Africa, and Asia, flickering torchlight once illuminated scenes that would remain hidden from human eyes for tens of thousands of years. There, on walls of stone, the hands and minds of Stone Age artists created humanity's first galleries, spaces where imagination took physical form and inner experience found expression in pigment and line. These were not crude scratchings or simple representations, but sophisticated works of art that reveal the presence of minds capable of abstraction, symbolism, and aesthetic judgment. The cave paintings of Lascaux, Altamira, and Chauvet represent only the most famous examples of an artistic tradition that extended across continents and persisted for millennia. The images they contain, running horses with flowing manes, massive aurochs rendered with anatomical precision, hunters pursuing prey across painted landscapes, demonstrate observational skills and artistic techniques that rival those of any period in human history. But these paintings were more than mere decoration. They were created in spaces that were difficult and dangerous to reach, often requiring long journeys through narrow passages into the heart of the earth. The effort required to transport pigments, prepare surfaces, and work by flickering firelight suggests that these images served purposes that went far beyond simple artistic expression. The pigments themselves represent sophisticated chemical knowledge. Ochre, manganese, charcoal, and other materials were processed and combined to create colors that have retained their vibrancy across thousands of years. Different preparation techniques produced different effects. Some pigments were blown onto the walls through hollow bones, creating soft, atmospheric effects, while others were applied with brushes made from animal hair or plant fibers. Hand stencils found in many caves create an intimate connection across vast spans of time. These were made by placing a hand against the cave wall and blowing pigment around it, leaving a negative image that seems to reach directly across the millennia. Many caves contain dozens of these handprints, including those of children, suggesting that the creation of cave art was a community activity that involved multiple generations. The subjects chosen for cave paintings reveal careful selection and symbolic thinking. Certain animals appear repeatedly while others that were common in the environment are rarely depicted. This selectivity suggests that the images weren't simple records of daily life but representations chosen for their symbolic or spiritual significance. The placement of images within caves also appears to follow symbolic logic, with certain types of animals positioned in specific locations. Three-dimensional art emerged alongside cave painting in the form of carved figurines, decorated tools, and sculptural objects. The Venus figurines, small sculptures of female forms found across Europe, represent one of the earliest sculptural traditions. These objects required sophisticated understanding of three-dimensional form and considerable skill in working with ivory, bone, and stone. Personal ornamentation became increasingly elaborate during the Stone Age, with people creating jewelry from shells, teeth, carved bone, and polished stone. These ornaments often traveled great distances from their points of origin, indicating trade networks that connected distant communities and shared aesthetic traditions that transcended local boundaries. The decoration of functional objects reveals the integration of artistic sensibility with practical life. Spear throwers were carved with animal figures, tools were decorated with geometric patterns, and containers bore artistic motifs that served no utilitarian purpose. This suggests that aesthetic considerations were important even in the creation of everyday objects. Musical expression accompanied visual art as an essential component of Stone Age culture. Bone flutes capable of producing complex melodies have been found in archaeological sites across Europe. These instruments required sophisticated understanding of acoustics and considerable skill to manufacture. The presence of music suggests rich cultural traditions that combined multiple art forms. Ritual practices provided contexts for artistic expression that went beyond individual creativity. Cave art was often created in locations that had special spiritual significance, while decorated objects were frequently found in burial contexts. This association between art and ritual suggests that artistic creation was understood as a sacred activity with spiritual implications. The development of symbolic notation systems represents one of the most significant cognitive breakthroughs of the Stone Age. Scratches and marks found on bones and cave walls appear to represent early attempts at recording information, possibly lunar cycles, hunting tallies, or other data that needed to be preserved over time. These marks represent the earliest known information storage systems. Body painting and tattooing created temporary and permanent forms of artistic expression that transformed the human body into a canvas for cultural and personal identity. While direct evidence of these practices is limited due to the poor preservation of soft tissues, ethnographic parallels and indirect archaeological evidence suggest that body art was widespread and sophisticated. Ceremonial objects demonstrate the integration of artistic skill with spiritual practice. Elaborately decorated masks, ritual weapons, and sacred containers all show evidence of extraordinary craftsmanship devoted to religious and ceremonial purposes. These objects were often buried with their owners, suggesting their importance in both life and death. The creation of art required specialized knowledge and skills that were passed down through apprenticeship systems. The consistency of artistic traditions across long periods and wide geographical areas indicates that artistic techniques were taught systematically and maintained through cultural transmission. Master artists must have trained students in complex skills that required years to develop. Artistic traditions evolved and changed over time, showing innovation and stylistic development that mirror the evolution of other technologies. Early cave paintings are often simpler and more schematic, while later examples show greater naturalism and technical sophistication. This evolution suggests that artistic traditions were dynamic and responsive to changing cultural needs and aesthetic preferences. The psychological functions of art in Stone Age communities were probably multiple and complex. Art may have served as a form of communication, a method of education, a means of spiritual expression, and a way of creating group identity and cohesion. The time and energy invested in artistic creation suggests that these functions were considered essential for community well-being. Sacred landscapes emerged as people invested particular places with spiritual and artistic significance. Caves with paintings, rock formations with carvings, and other decorated natural features became focal points for ritual activity and artistic expression. These locations often remained sacred for thousands of years, with successive generations adding their own contributions to existing artistic traditions. The relationship between art and narrative is evident in many cave paintings that appear to tell stories or record specific events. Sequential images, hunting scenes, and symbolic compositions all suggest that visual art was used to preserve and communicate complex narratives that were important to community identity and cultural continuity. Storage and preservation of artistic materials required sophisticated planning and resource management. Pigments had to be collected, processed, and stored for future use. Artistic tools needed to be maintained and replaced. The investment in these materials and tools suggests that artistic creation was a valued and ongoing activity rather than an occasional pursuit. Collaborative artistic projects brought communities together in shared creative endeavors that strengthened social bonds and created collective achievements that no individual could accomplish alone. Large cave painting projects that involved multiple artists working over extended periods demonstrate the presence of sophisticated social organization and shared aesthetic vision. The emergence of art during the Stone Age represents one of the most profound developments in human evolution, the awakening of consciousness to its own creative potential and the recognition that human experience could be given permanent form through artistic expression. These first artists weren't primitive people struggling with crude tools, but sophisticated individuals with developed aesthetic sensibilities and advanced technical skills. Their legacy extends far beyond the caves and artifacts they left behind. They established artistic traditions, developed technical innovations, and created cultural practices that would influence human creativity for millennia to come. Every painting, sculpture, and musical composition traces its conceptual ancestry back to those first artists who worked by firelight in hidden caves, transforming their inner visions into lasting works of art. To stand before these ancient artworks is to witness the birth of human consciousness as we understand it, minds capable not just of solving practical problems or maintaining social relationships, but of creating beauty, meaning, and lasting expressions of the human experience. In their art, we see the emergence of the capacity for transcendence that would define human culture throughout history. From these first expressions of symbolic consciousness, we move now to examine the ways Stone Age peoples understood death, spirituality, and the great mysteries that surrounded human existence. In the quiet moments when Stone Age communities faced the death of a member, their responses revealed some of the deepest aspects of human consciousness. The recognition that death was not simply the end of biological function, but a transformation that demanded ritual acknowledgement and spiritual understanding. The archaeological evidence of Stone Age burial practices provides a unique window into the minds of people grappling with questions that remain central to human experience. The earliest known deliberate burials date back over 100,000 years, representing a crucial moment in human development when death became something more than the simple disposal of remains. These burials involved careful preparation of the body, the excavation of graves, and often the inclusion of objects that the deceased might need in an afterlife. Such practices suggest the presence of abstract thinking about consciousness, identity, and the possibility of existence beyond physical death. Grave goods found in Stone Age burials reveal sophisticated beliefs about the continuity of personal identity after death. Tools, weapons, ornaments, and food offerings were placed with the deceased, suggesting that death was understood as a journey to another state of existence rather than simple annihilation. The specific objects chosen for burial often reflected the individual's role in life. Hunters were buried with spears, craftspeople with tools, children with toys. Body positioning in graves appears to follow symbolic patterns that varied between different communities and time periods. Some bodies were placed in fetal positions, possibly symbolizing rebirth or return to the womb of the earth. Others were positioned as if sleeping, with heads oriented toward specific directions that may have had cosmological significance. These patterns suggest shared beliefs about the proper way to prepare for the afterlife journey. Burial locations were often chosen with great care, reflecting beliefs about sacred geography and the proper relationship between the living and the dead. Some graves were placed within caves that also contained artwork, suggesting connections between artistic expression and spiritual beliefs. Others were positioned on elevated ground or near water sources, locations that may have been considered spiritually significant. Collective burials indicate sophisticated social structures and beliefs about community continuity beyond individual death. Multiple individuals buried together, sometimes families, sometimes larger groups, suggest that death was understood as a transition that could be shared and that social relationships continued beyond physical existence. These collective burials often show evidence of simultaneous death, possibly from disease or violence, but also careful ritual preparation. The treatment of children's burials reveals particularly poignant evidence of emotional and spiritual sophistication. Child graves often contain more elaborate grave goods than adult burials, suggesting special concern for the spiritual welfare of the young. Some child burials include toys and ornaments that appear to have been made specifically for burial rather than for use in life, indicating considerable investment in ensuring proper preparation for the afterlife journey. Ritualized cannibalism practiced by some Stone Age groups appears to have had spiritual rather than nutritional purposes. Evidence suggests that the consumption of human remains was part of complex burial rituals designed to transfer the spiritual essence of the deceased to the living community. These practices required sophisticated beliefs about the nature of consciousness and the mechanisms through which spiritual power could be transmitted. Secondary burial practices, the disinterment and reburial of remains, after initial decomposition, indicate complex beliefs about the stages of death and the timing of spiritual transformation. These practices often involve the careful cleaning and arrangement of bones, suggesting that death was understood as a process rather than a single event. Such rituals required precise timing and specialized knowledge of decomposition processes. Ancestor veneration appears in the archaeological record through evidence of continued interaction with burial sites long after initial interment. Offerings left at graves, the rearrangement of remains, and the construction of monuments over burial sites all suggest that the dead remained active members of the community, whose spiritual presence continued to influence the living. Shamanic practices involving communication with the spirits of the dead are suggested by grave goods that include materials associated with altered states of consciousness. Certain burials contain objects that appear to be related to the use of psychoactive substances, specialized tools that may have been used in ritual contexts, and artistic objects that depict transformation themes common in shamanic traditions. Astronomical alignments found in some Stone Age burial sites suggest sophisticated understanding of celestial cycles and their relationship to spiritual beliefs. Graves oriented toward specific star positions, burial chambers aligned with seasonal phenomena, and calendar-like arrangements of stone markers all indicate that death rituals were integrated with cosmological knowledge and seasonal cycles. The preservation of bodies through mummification or other techniques appears in some Stone Age contexts, suggesting attempts to maintain physical integrity for spiritual purposes. These practices required sophisticated understanding of preservation chemistry and considerable investment of time and resources, indicating that the condition of the body after death was considered spiritually important. Dream symbolism and its relationship to death beliefs can be inferred from artistic representations found in burial contexts. Images that appear to depict dream states, transformation sequences, and otherworldly journeys suggest that Stone Age peoples understood dreams as a form of spiritual travel that might continue after death. This connection between dreams and death beliefs appears in many later spiritual traditions. Tribal myths and origin stories, while not directly preserved from the Stone Age, may retain elements of ancient beliefs about death and spiritual transformation. Common themes in these stories, such as journeys to underworld realms, communication with animal spirits, and the transformation of the dead into ancestors, may reflect belief systems that originated during the Stone Age period. Healing practices associated with death and dying suggest sophisticated understanding of the relationship between physical and spiritual well-being. Grave goods sometimes include materials that appear to be medicinal, while burial positions sometimes suggest attempts to heal or protect the deceased. These practices indicate that death was understood as a condition that could be influenced through proper ritual intervention. Sacred objects buried with the dead often show evidence of long use and careful maintenance during life, suggesting that certain items acquired spiritual significance through association with their owners. These objects, tools that had been resharpened many times, ornaments showing wear patterns, containers that had been repaired repeatedly, carried the spiritual essence of their users and served as bridges between the living and the dead. Communal mourning practices can be inferred from evidence of group activities associated with burial sites. Large quantities of food remains, evidence of fires and gatherings, and the presence of materials from distant locations all suggest that death was marked by community-wide ceremonies that brought together extended networks of related groups. The relationship between death beliefs and social hierarchy appears in the differential treatment of burials within communities. Some individuals received more elaborate burial treatment than others, suggesting that spiritual beliefs were integrated with social structures and that different roles in life corresponded to different expectations about death and afterlife experience. Protection rituals designed to safeguard both the dead and the living appear in various forms of burial practice. Graves covered with heavy stones, bodies bound with cords, and the inclusion of apotropaic objects all suggest concerns about the proper containment of death's power and the protection of community well-being from potentially dangerous spiritual forces. The integration of death beliefs with ecological understanding appears in burial practices that show sophisticated knowledge of decomposition processes and their relationship to environmental cycles. Grave locations chosen for specific soil conditions, seasonal timing of burial rituals, and the use of plant materials that influence decomposition all suggest that death was understood as part of natural cycles rather than as an alien intrusion into life. These burial practices and death beliefs reveal minds capable of grappling with the most profound questions of human existence. Stone Age peoples developed sophisticated responses to mortality that integrated emotional, spiritual, and social needs into coherent systems of belief and practice. Their understanding of death was not primitive or simplistic but complex and nuanced, reflecting the same intellectual sophistication that appeared in their technology, art, and social organization. The questions they faced: what happens to consciousness after death? How should the living relate to the dead? What is the proper way to prepare for the afterlife journey? Remains central to human spiritual experience. Their answers, preserved in the careful arrangement of bones and grave goods, provide evidence of humanity's earliest attempts to find meaning in mortality and hope in the face of loss. From these profound contemplations of mortality and spiritual meaning, we turn now to examine how Stone Age communities organized themselves for one of their most challenging and essential activities, the pursuit of the animals that provided both sustenance and the raw materials for survival. The hunt was more than a search for food. It was a complex orchestration of knowledge, skill, courage, and cooperation that tested every aspect of Stone Age intelligence and social organization. Success required understanding animal behavior, mastering sophisticated weapons, coordinating group efforts, and maintaining the spiritual relationships that many communities believed were essential for hunting success. The pursuit of game shaped human evolution in profound ways, driving the development of planning abilities, communication skills, and the technological innovations that would define human culture. Tracking represented one of the most sophisticated information processing skills in the Stone Age toolkit. Skilled trackers could read stories written in disturbed earth, bent vegetation, and scattered droppings that revealed not just the identity and direction of prey animals, but their health, stress levels, group composition, and likely destination. This knowledge required understanding of animal psychology, environmental conditions, and the subtle signs that marked the passage of different species through the landscape. Weapon systems designed for hunting evolved into sophisticated engineering solutions that maximized effectiveness while minimizing risk to hunters. Spear throwers, for instance, functioned as mechanical advantage devices that dramatically increased the range and power of projectiles. These tools required precise manufacturing tolerances and careful adjustment to match the specific characteristics of individual spears and the physical capabilities of their users. Projectile points were crafted to meet the specific requirements of different hunting situations. Points designed for large game were heavy and robust, capable of penetrating thick hide and creating massive tissue damage. Those intended for birds or small mammals were light and sharp, designed to kill quickly without destroying valuable meat or fur. The diversity of point styles found in archaeological sites reflects sophisticated understanding of ballistics and terminal effects. Hunting strategies varied dramatically depending on target species, terrain, season, and available personnel. Ambush hunting required intimate knowledge of animal travel patterns and the patience to wait motionless for hours. Persistence hunting involved tracking wounded animals over long distances, until exhaustion allowed hunters to close for the kill. Drive hunting required coordination among many individuals to funnel animals toward waiting hunters or natural traps. Cooperative hunting techniques demanded sophisticated communication and planning abilities. Large-scale hunts might involve dozens of people working in carefully coordinated roles, drivers to push animals toward ambush sites, hunters positioned at strategic locations, and support personnel to manage logistics and process kills. These operations required planning, leadership, and precise execution that demonstrated advanced organizational capabilities. Seasonal hunting patterns required long-term planning and resource management that extended far beyond individual hunting expeditions. Groups had to position themselves to take advantage of animal migrations, breeding seasons, and other predictable behaviors, while ensuring that their hunting activities didn't deplete local animal populations. This ecological understanding reflected sophisticated thinking about sustainability and resource conservation. Hunting tools extended far beyond weapons to include a complete technological system for pursuing, killing, and processing game. Nets and snares allowed hunters to capture animals without direct confrontation. Pit traps could take large animals that were too dangerous to approach directly. Processing tools for butchering, skinning, and preserving meat were as important as the weapons used for killing. The social organization of hunting expeditions reflected the high stakes and complex requirements of successful hunts. Leadership roles were often temporary and task-specific, with different individuals taking charge during different phases of the hunt. Decision-making had to be rapid and authoritative, while risk management required careful assessment of changing conditions and the welfare of all participants. Risk assessment and management were crucial elements of hunting strategy, because failed hunts could mean starvation, while hunting accidents could result in serious injury or death. Hunters had to balance the potential rewards of pursuing dangerous game against the risks to individual and group survival. This required sophisticated probability assessment and group decision-making processes. Spiritual aspects of hunting appear in archaeological evidence, and ethnographic parallels that suggest complex belief systems surrounding the relationship between hunters and prey. Many Stone Age communities appear to have believed that successful hunting required maintaining proper spiritual relationships with animal spirits. This involved ritual preparations, offering ceremonies, and careful treatment of animal remains. Processing and preservation of hunting products required sophisticated knowledge of anatomy, chemistry, and storage techniques. Different parts of animals were processed in specific ways to maximize their utility and longevity. Meat was preserved through smoking, drying, and other techniques that could extend its useful life for months. Hides were processed into leather through complex tanning procedures that involved multiple chemical treatments. Distribution of hunting products within communities followed complex social rules that balanced individual contribution with community needs. Successful hunters received recognition and choice portions, but everyone was fed regardless of their direct contribution to the hunt. These distribution systems maintained group morale while providing incentives for skill development and participation. Hunting knowledge was preserved and transmitted through apprenticeship systems that began in childhood and continued throughout an individual's life. Young people learned by observation and gradual participation in hunting activities, developing skills and knowledge that couldn't be acquired through formal instruction alone. Master hunters served as teachers and leaders who guided the development of new generations. Specialized hunting roles emerged as groups developed more sophisticated hunting strategies. Some individuals became expert trackers, others specialized in weapon manufacture, and still others focused on the logistics of hunting expeditions. This specialization increased hunting effectiveness while creating social roles that enhanced group cohesion and individual identity. Environmental adaptation required hunters to modify their techniques for different habitats and climate conditions. Forest hunting demanded different skills and tools than hunting on open grasslands. Seasonal changes required adjustments in strategy, equipment, and target species. This adaptability reflected sophisticated understanding of ecological relationships and technological flexibility. Long-distance hunting expeditions required extensive planning and resource management that tested the limits of Stone Age organizational capabilities. Groups had to carry supplies for extended journeys while remaining mobile enough to pursue game effectively. Navigation over unfamiliar terrain required specialized knowledge and careful attention to environmental cues. Technology transfer between hunting and other activities created cross-fertilization that drove innovation in multiple areas. Techniques developed for hunting were adapted for warfare, tool manufacture, and other purposes. The cognitive skills required for successful hunting, planning, coordination, risk assessment, were applied to other challenges facing Stone Age communities. Competition between hunting groups created selective pressures that drove technological and tactical innovation. Groups that developed superior hunting techniques gained advantages that could determine survival during difficult periods. This competition fostered rapid development and refinement of hunting technologies and strategies. The hunt was simultaneously a practical necessity, a social institution, a technological proving ground, and a spiritual practice that integrated multiple aspects of Stone Age life. Success required not just individual skill, but effective group cooperation, sophisticated technology, and deep understanding of natural processes. The hunters who pursued game across the ancient landscape were not primitive figures struggling with crude tools, but sophisticated professionals employing complex strategies and advanced technologies. Their success in mastering the challenges of hunting enabled the survival and expansion of human populations throughout the Stone Age world. The skills they developed, planning, cooperation, technological innovation, and environmental understanding, became the foundation for all subsequent human achievements. Every advance in human capability traces its roots back to the patient work of those early hunters who learned to see opportunity in the movement of animals across the landscape. From the coordinated efforts of hunting parties, we turn now to examine another crucial aspect of Stone Age survival: the sophisticated knowledge of plant life that provided food, medicine, and raw materials for countless uses. While hunting captured the attention and imagination of Stone Age communities, gathering provided the steady foundation of calories and nutrients that sustained human populations through every season and environmental challenge. The knowledge required for successful plant gathering was encyclopedic, encompassing hundreds of species, their seasonal availability, optimal processing techniques, and countless other details that meant the difference between abundance and starvation. Plant gathering was not the simple collection of obvious food sources that many modern people imagine. It was a sophisticated science that required understanding of botany, chemistry, ecology, and seasonal cycles that took decades to master completely. Successful gatherers could identify edible plants at any stage of their growth cycle, knew when each species would be at peak nutritional value, and possessed detailed knowledge of which parts were safe to eat and how they should be prepared. The diversity of plant foods utilized by Stone Age peoples was extraordinary. Nuts, seeds, berries, roots, leaves, bark, flowers, and even some wood tissues all provided nutrition when properly identified and processed. Many plants required complex preparation to become edible, leaching bitter compounds from acorns, fermenting certain roots to break down toxins, or grinding seeds to improve digestibility. This processing knowledge was as crucial as the initial identification skills. Seasonal timing determined the success or failure of plant gathering expeditions. Gatherers had to know precisely when different species would be ready for harvest, how long the optimal gathering window would last, and how to predict variations caused by weather and local growing conditions. This required detailed observation of environmental cues and the ability to integrate multiple variables into accurate predictions. Geographic knowledge was essential because plant resources were distributed unevenly across the landscape. Gatherers maintained mental maps that included the locations of productive groves, meadows, and other plant communities. They knew which slopes got morning sun, where water collected during rains, and how local soil conditions affected plant growth. This environmental awareness guided the movements of entire communities. Processing techniques transformed inedible or marginally nutritious plants into valuable food sources. Stone grinding implements could reduce hard seeds to digestible flour. Cooking in earth ovens broke down tough plant fibers and neutralized toxins. Fermentation processes created foods that could be stored for extended periods. Each technique required specific knowledge and carefully maintained equipment. Storage and preservation methods allowed communities to maintain plant food supplies through seasons when fresh gathering was impossible. Drying techniques preserved fruits and vegetables for months. Underground storage pits protected cached supplies from animals and weather. Some communities developed methods for processing plants into concentrated, portable foods that could sustain hunting parties and migration groups. Medicinal plant knowledge paralleled food gathering expertise and often involved the same individuals who served as community healers. Plants provided treatments for injuries, infections, digestive problems, and other common health issues. The knowledge of which plants were therapeutic, how to prepare them correctly, and what dosages were safe required understanding that approached modern pharmacological science. Tool specialization for plant gathering included implements designed for specific harvesting and processing tasks, digging sticks for extracting roots, specialized baskets for different types of seeds, grinding stones shaped for particular nuts or grains. Each tool was optimized for its intended use and represented the accumulated knowledge of generations of gatherers. Women often specialized in plant gathering, though gender roles varied between communities, and individuals with particular aptitude might pursue gathering regardless of traditional role assignments. Female gatherers frequently possessed the most detailed botanical knowledge in their communities and served as teachers for younger generations learning essential survival skills. Cooperative gathering expeditions brought together multiple families or groups to harvest seasonal abundances that required coordinated effort. Some plants were available in large quantities for only brief periods, making group harvesting essential for maximizing the benefit from these opportunities. These expeditions required planning, organization, and equitable distribution of both labor and results. Trade relationships developed around plant resources that weren't available in all territories. Communities located near productive nut groves might exchange their surplus for medicinal plants from distant regions. Seeds and other plant materials became valuable trade goods that connected far-flung groups and facilitated the spread of botanical knowledge. Experimental gathering involved the constant testing of new plant species and preparation methods. Gatherers were always alert for unfamiliar plants that might prove useful, but they approached experimentation cautiously because mistakes could be fatal. New plant knowledge was tested carefully and shared conservatively until its safety and utility were established. Ecological management practices maintained the productivity of gathering areas over long periods. Gatherers understood that their harvesting activities affected plant communities and developed techniques that enhanced rather than depleted local resources. Some communities actively managed wild plant populations through selective harvesting, seed dispersal, and other interventions. Teaching and learning systems preserved botanical knowledge across generations through careful apprenticeships that began in childhood. Young gatherers learned through observation and gradual participation, developing skills and knowledge that couldn't be acquired through formal instruction. Master gatherers served as repositories of community knowledge and guides for developing expertise. Spiritual relationships with plant life appear in archaeological evidence and ethnographic parallels that suggest complex belief systems surrounding gathering activities. Many communities believed that successful gathering required maintaining proper relationships with plant spirits. This involved ritual preparations, offering ceremonies, and respectful treatment of plant communities. Risk management in plant gathering required constant vigilance because mistaken identification could result in poisoning or death. Gatherers developed systematic approaches to plant identification that minimized risks while maximizing opportunities. This included understanding of plant families, recognition of dangerous lookalikes, and testing procedures for unfamiliar species. Nutritional knowledge guided gathering decisions based on understanding of what nutrients different plants provided and how to combine plant foods for optimal nutrition. Gatherers knew which plants were rich in calories, which provided essential vitamins, and how to balance different food sources for complete nutrition. This knowledge was particularly crucial during food shortage periods. Environmental indicators helped gatherers predict plant availability and plan gathering activities accordingly. Changes in rainfall, temperature, and other conditions affected plant growth in predictable ways. Skilled gatherers could assess environmental conditions and make accurate predictions about plant productivity in different areas. Innovation in gathering techniques involved the constant refinement of harvesting and processing methods. New tools, improved processing techniques, and more efficient harvesting strategies all emerged from the accumulated experience of countless gatherers working to improve their effectiveness and efficiency. Gathering provided the foundation for human settlements because reliable plant food sources enabled groups to remain in particular areas for extended periods. The transition from nomadic to semi-sedentary lifestyles often began with the exploitation of rich plant resources that could support larger populations for longer periods. Integration with other subsistence activities required careful coordination between gathering and hunting schedules. Groups had to balance the time and energy devoted to different food procurement strategies while ensuring that all essential resources were obtained. This required sophisticated planning and resource allocation decisions. The sophisticated knowledge systems that supported plant gathering represent one of humanity's earliest scientific achievements. Gatherers were botanists, chemists, ecologists, and nutritionists who maintained detailed understanding of complex natural systems through careful observation and experimentation. Their expertise enabled human survival and expansion into diverse environments throughout the Stone Age world. Their legacy extends far beyond the immediate practical benefits they provided. The observational skills, systematic thinking, and experimental approaches they developed became fundamental components of human intellectual development. Every advance in agriculture, medicine, and environmental science traces its conceptual origins back to the patient work of Stone Age gatherers, who learned to read the landscape like a textbook written in leaves and roots. To walk through ancient gathering grounds would have been to witness minds engaged in some of humanity's earliest scientific work. The careful observation of natural phenomena, the testing of hypotheses about plant properties, and the gradual accumulation of knowledge that would form the foundation for all subsequent understanding of the natural world. From these sophisticated plant knowledge systems, we turn now to examine the technological revolutions that marked the later periods of the Stone Age, the advances that would eventually carry humanity beyond stone tool technology and toward the metalworking civilizations that followed. As Stone Age communities accumulated knowledge and refined their techniques over thousands of years, their technological capabilities reached levels of sophistication that would not be surpassed until the development of modern industrial methods. The later Stone Age, often called the Neolithic period, witnessed a series of revolutionary innovations that transformed human society and laid the foundation for everything that would follow. The polishing of stone tools represented a quantum leap in manufacturing precision that enabled the creation of implements far superior to anything that could be achieved through knapping alone. ground stone axes could fell trees more efficiently than chipped implements, while polished surfaces reduced friction and improved cutting performance. The techniques required for effective grinding and polishing demanded new types of abrasives, specialized tools, and manufacturing processes that took considerable time and skill to complete. Composite tools that integrated multiple materials became increasingly sophisticated as artisans learned to combine the best properties of different substances into unified implements. Hafted axes that combined polished stone heads with carefully shaped wooden handles represented engineering solutions that maximized effectiveness while distributing stress loads efficiently. These tools required understanding of mechanical principles that wouldn't be formally described until much later in human history. Specialized manufacturing areas emerged as communities devoted specific locations to tool production activities. These workshops contained the specialized equipment needed for grinding, polishing, and hafting operations. The concentration of manufacturing in dedicated spaces increased efficiency while facilitating the training of apprentices and the development of increasingly sophisticated techniques. Quality control systems maintained consistency in tool production through standardized techniques and careful inspection of finished products. The uniformity seen in many Stone Age tool assemblages indicates that communities had developed effective methods for ensuring that implements met established performance standards. This standardization facilitated trade relationships and reduced the learning time required for new tool types. Raw material procurement became increasingly organized as communities developed specialized systems for obtaining high-quality stone, wood, and other materials. Long-distance trade networks carried premium raw materials across hundreds of miles, while local resource management ensured sustainable access to essential materials. This procurement required sophisticated planning and coordination between multiple communities. Mass production techniques enabled the creation of large quantities of standardized tools through efficient manufacturing processes. Archaeological sites have revealed evidence of workshop areas where hundreds of identical implements were produced using systematic techniques. This mass production suggests that some communities had developed economic specialization that went beyond simple subsistence activities. Agricultural tools emerged as communities began to experiment with systematic plant cultivation that went beyond simple gathering of wild resources. Hoes, digging sticks, harvesting implements, and processing tools all required new design approaches that optimized them for agricultural rather than gathering activities. These tools reflected changing relationships between humans and plant resources. Construction tools enabled the building of increasingly substantial and permanent structures that marked the transition from nomadic to sedentary lifestyles. Specialized implements for woodworking, earth moving, and stone cutting allowed communities to create buildings, fortifications, and other architectural features that required coordinated construction efforts. Textile production tools facilitated the development of sophisticated fiber arts that produced clothing, containers, and other fabric goods far superior to simple hide garments. Spindles, looms, needles, and other implements enabled the creation of complex textiles that demonstrated both technical skill and aesthetic sophistication. Measurement and planning tools suggest that Stone Age communities had developed systematic approaches to design and construction that required precise dimensional control, standardized units of measurement, geometric design principles, and planning techniques all appear in the archaeological record of later Stone Age sites. Transportation technology evolved to support the movement of heavy materials and finished goods over long distances. Cellads, rollers, levers, and other mechanical devices enabled communities to transport loads that would have been impossible to move using human strength alone. These innovations facilitated both construction projects and trade relationships. Storage technology improved dramatically as communities developed better methods for preserving and protecting valuable materials and finished goods. Specialized containers, underground storage facilities, and preservation techniques all contributed to the ability to maintain larger inventories of tools, materials, and food supplies. Precision manufacturing techniques enabled the creation of tools with extremely tight tolerances that approached the limits of what could be achieved using hand methods. Some Stone Age implements show dimensional consistency that rivals modern manufacturing standards. This precision required sophisticated measurement techniques and extraordinary manual skill. Metallurgy experimentation began during the later Stone Age as communities encountered native metals and began to explore their properties and potential uses. Early copper and gold working represented the first steps toward the metal technologies that would eventually replace stone tool production. These experiments required new knowledge of heating, shaping, and alloying techniques. Mathematical concepts emerged from the practical requirements of tool production, construction, and trade activities. Geometric principles, proportional relationships, and numerical systems all developed to support increasingly complex technological activities. This mathematical knowledge was preserved and transmitted through practical applications rather than abstract theory. Engineering principles became increasingly sophisticated as communities tackled larger and more complex construction projects. Understanding of leverage, load distribution, structural stability, and other mechanical concepts all emerged from practical experience with building and tool production activities. Organizational systems developed to coordinate the complex manufacturing and construction activities that required cooperation between multiple specialists. Project management, resource allocation, and quality control all required systematic approaches that represented early forms of industrial organization. Innovation acceleration occurred as communities accumulated knowledge and developed more effective methods for testing and implementing new technologies. The rate of technological change increased dramatically during the later Stone Age, as each innovation provided the foundation for further advances. Knowledge preservation systems ensured that technological innovations were maintained and transmitted across generations through increasingly sophisticated educational and cultural institutions. Formal apprenticeships, guild-like organizations, and specialized schools all emerged to support the growing complexity of technological knowledge. The technological achievements of the later Stone Age were not primitive precursors to more advanced civilizations. They were sophisticated solutions to complex technical challenges that required intelligence, creativity, and systematic thinking. Many of the principles and techniques developed during this period remained in use for thousands of years and formed the foundation for all subsequent technological development. These innovations emerged from minds that were fully modern in their capacity for abstract thinking, systematic experimentation, and creative problem-solving. The craftspeople who created these technologies were engineers, scientists, and inventors who pushed the boundaries of what was possible using the materials and knowledge available to them. Their legacy extends far beyond the specific tools and techniques they developed. They established the conceptual frameworks, experimental methods, and educational systems that would support all future technological advancement. Every computer, spacecraft, and medical device traces its intellectual ancestry back to the patient work of Stone Age innovators who first learned to systematically improve human capabilities through technological innovation. From these remarkable technological achievements, we move now to examine one of the most profound transformations in human history, the gradual transition from hunting and gathering to agriculture that would fundamentally reshape human society and humanity's relationship with the natural world. The transformation from hunting and gathering to agriculture was not a sudden revolution, but a gradual process that unfolded over thousands of years and involved countless small discoveries and innovations that slowly accumulated into a completely new way of life. This transition, often called the Neolithic Revolution, was arguably the most important development in human history, setting in motion changes that would lead directly to modern civilization. Plant domestication began with careful observation of wild plant behavior and the recognition that human activities could influence plant characteristics and productivity. Early agriculturalists noticed that plants growing near human settlements often displayed beneficial traits, larger seeds, more vigorous growth, or other desirable characteristics. This led to systematic experiments in plant cultivation that gradually transformed wild species into crops. Seed selection was crucial to the domestication process, as farmers learned to save seeds from plants with the most desirable characteristics. This selective breeding gradually created crop varieties that were larger, more nutritious, and better adapted to cultivation than their wild ancestors. The process required patience and systematic observation over many generations to achieve significant improvements. Soil management techniques developed as communities learned that crop productivity could be improved through systematic modification of growing conditions. Early farmers discovered how to improve soil fertility through composting, controlled burning, and other interventions that enhanced plant growth. This knowledge required understanding of soil chemistry and plant nutrition that emerged from careful experimentation. Water management systems enabled agriculture in areas that wouldn't naturally support intensive plant cultivation. Irrigation channels, drainage systems, and water storage facilities all emerged as communities learned to control water availability for their crops. These engineering projects required coordination between multiple families and represented some of humanity's earliest large-scale construction efforts. Crop rotation and field management practices maintained soil productivity over extended periods and prevented the depletion that could result from continuous cultivation of the same plants. Early farmers discovered that different crops affected soil in different ways, and that systematic rotation could maintain or even improve growing conditions over time. Storage technology became crucial as agricultural communities needed to preserve large quantities of harvested crops for use throughout the year. Granaries, underground storage pits, and preservation techniques all developed to protect agricultural surpluses from spoilage, moisture, and pest damage. These storage systems enabled communities to maintain larger populations and weather periods of poor harvests. Animal domestication paralleled plant cultivation as communities learned to manage and breed animals for human benefit. Dogs were probably the first domesticated animals, followed by sheep, goats, cattle, and pigs. Each species required different management techniques and offered different benefits. Meat, milk, labor, transportation, or raw materials for clothing and tools. Settlement patterns changed dramatically as agricultural communities could support larger populations in permanent locations. Villages, towns, and eventually cities all emerged from the agricultural foundation that enabled dense human populations to survive in fixed locations. These settlements required new forms of social organization and governance to manage the complex interactions between large numbers of people. Social stratification increased as agricultural communities developed more complex economic systems and specialized occupations. Some individuals could focus on activities other than food production because agricultural surpluses supported craftspeople, leaders, and other specialists. This social differentiation created new forms of inequality, but also enabled technological and cultural advances that wouldn't have been possible in hunting and gathering societies. Trade networks expanded dramatically as agricultural communities produced surpluses that could be exchanged for goods not available locally. These trade relationships connected distant regions and facilitated the spread of agricultural techniques, crop varieties, and technological innovations. The volume and complexity of trade increased far beyond anything possible in pre-agricultural societies. Population growth accelerated as agricultural communities could support much larger populations than hunting and gathering groups. The reliable food supplies provided by agriculture enabled survival of more children to adulthood and reduced the mortality associated with food shortages. This population growth created both opportunities and challenges for early agricultural societies. Environmental impacts of agriculture were profound and permanent as humans began to systematically modify landscapes for crop production. Deforestation, soil erosion, and changes in water systems all resulted from agricultural activities. These environmental changes were generally gradual and local initially, but they established patterns of human environmental modification that continue to the present. Technological acceleration increased dramatically as agricultural communities could support specialists who devoted their time to innovation and experimentation. Better tools, more efficient techniques, and new technologies all emerged more rapidly in agricultural societies than had been possible when everyone's time was devoted to food procurement. Cultural developments flourished as agricultural communities had the time and resources to invest in art, religion, and other activities beyond immediate survival needs. Complex religious systems, elaborate artistic traditions, and sophisticated cultural institutions all emerged from the foundation of agricultural productivity. Conflict patterns changed as agricultural communities had fixed territories and accumulated wealth that could be the object of disputes between groups. Warfare became more organized and destructive as communities developed specialized warrior classes and more effective weapons. However, agricultural communities also had incentives for peaceful cooperation that created new forms of diplomacy and alliance. Disease patterns shifted as larger, denser populations and close contact with domestic animals created conditions for infectious diseases that hadn't been significant problems for hunting and gathering groups. Agricultural communities had to develop new medical knowledge and public health practices to manage these disease challenges. Economic systems became increasingly complex as agricultural communities developed currencies, markets, and other institutions for managing the production and distribution of goods and services. These economic innovations enabled more efficient resource allocation and facilitated the specialization that drove technological and cultural development. Political organization evolved to manage the complex coordination required in agricultural communities. Leadership roles became more formal and permanent. Laws and regulations developed to govern community behavior, and administrative systems emerged to manage public projects and resources. Knowledge systems expanded dramatically as agricultural communities accumulated vast amounts of technical knowledge about crops, animals, weather patterns, and environmental management. This knowledge was preserved through writing systems, formal education, and specialized institutions that maintained and transmitted complex information across generations. Religious beliefs often centered around agricultural cycles and the relationship between humans and the natural forces that controlled crop productivity. Many agricultural societies developed elaborate religious systems that incorporated seasonal celebrations, fertility rituals, and other practices designed to ensure successful harvests. The transition to agriculture was not uniform across different regions and communities. Some groups adopted agricultural practices quickly and completely, while others maintained hunting and gathering lifestyles alongside limited cultivation. This diversity in adaptation strategies created a complex mosaic of different subsistence systems that persisted for thousands of years. Irreversible changes resulted from the agricultural transition that made it impossible for communities to return to previous ways of life. Population densities, environmental modifications, and cultural institutions all created dependencies that locked agricultural communities into their new way of life, even when it involved hardships and challenges. The agricultural revolution was simultaneously humanity's greatest achievement and its most fateful decision. It enabled the population growth, technological development, and cultural sophistication that characterize human civilization. But it also created environmental problems, social inequalities, and other challenges that continue to affect human societies. To understand the agricultural transition is to witness the moment when humanity took control of its own evolution and began the systematic transformation of the planet that continues to the present day. The farmers who first saved seeds and planted crops were not just feeding themselves, they were setting in motion changes that would reshape the entire relationship between humans and the natural world. From this revolutionary transformation of human subsistence strategies, we turn now to examine the social and cultural changes that accompanied the agricultural revolution and laid the foundation for all subsequent human civilization. The shift from hunting and gathering to agricultural production created social pressures and opportunities that fundamentally transformed human communities, giving rise to forms of social organization, cultural expression, and technological innovation that would define civilization for millennia to come. These changes were not simply additions to existing ways of life, but profound transformations that touched every aspect of human experience and created the foundation for everything we recognize as modern society. Permanent settlements emerged as agricultural communities could support larger populations in fixed locations for extended periods. These settlements grew from small villages into towns and eventually cities as agricultural productivity increased and supported more complex social structures. The physical layout of these settlements reflected new forms of social organization and created the architectural foundations for urban civilization. Social hierarchy became more pronounced as agricultural societies developed specialized roles and accumulated wealth in ways that hadn't been possible for hunting and gathering groups. Leaders, priests, craftspeople, farmers, and laborers all occupied different positions in increasingly stratified social systems. These hierarchies were often formalized through titles, ceremonies, and legal systems that defined rights and obligations for different social classes. Occupational specialization flourished as agricultural surpluses enabled some individuals to pursue activities other than food production. Craftspeople could devote their time to perfecting pottery, metalworking, textile production, and other specialized skills. This specialization led to technological advances and improved quality of manufactured goods while creating new forms of social identity based on profession rather than kinship. Property concepts evolved to accommodate the new reality of fixed assets and accumulated wealth that characterized agricultural societies. Land ownership, inheritance rights, and other legal concepts developed to regulate access to agricultural resources and prevent conflicts over property. These legal innovations required formal institutions and record-keeping systems to maintain and enforce. Religious institutions became more complex and formalized as agricultural communities developed elaborate belief systems centered around agricultural cycles, fertility, and the natural forces that controlled crop productivity. Priests, temples, religious ceremonies, and theological doctrines all emerged to manage the spiritual life of agricultural communities and provide meaning for the new way of life. Technological acceleration increased dramatically as specialized craftspeople and agricultural surpluses enabled more rapid innovation and experimentation. Pottery making, metalworking, textile production, and construction techniques all advanced more quickly in agricultural societies than had been possible during the hunting and gathering period. These technological advances created positive feedback loops that further enhanced agricultural productivity. Trade expansion connected agricultural communities across vast distances as surplus production enabled exchange relationships that went far beyond local needs. Trade routes carried goods, ideas, and technologies between distant regions, creating networks of cultural and economic interaction that spanned continents. These trade relationships facilitated the spread of agricultural techniques and cultural innovations. Population growth accelerated as agricultural communities could support much larger populations than hunting and gathering groups. This population growth created both opportunities and challenges. More people meant more labor for agricultural and construction projects, but also more complex social management requirements and increased pressure on natural resources. Cultural complexity increased dramatically as agricultural communities had the time, resources, and population density to support elaborate cultural institutions. Art, music, literature, and other forms of cultural expression all flourished in ways that hadn't been possible in smaller, more mobile communities. These cultural developments created new forms of social identity and community cohesion. Political organization evolved to manage the coordination required for large-scale agricultural production and community governance. Formal leadership roles, legal systems, administrative bureaucracies, and other political institutions all emerged to handle the complex decisions and relationships that characterized agricultural societies. Conflict patterns changed as agricultural communities had fixed territories and accumulated wealth that could be the object of disputes between groups. Warfare became more organized and destructive as communities developed professional military classes and more effective weapons. However, agricultural societies also had greater incentives for peaceful cooperation and developed sophisticated diplomatic and legal systems for managing conflicts. Economic systems became increasingly sophisticated as agricultural communities developed currencies, markets, and other institutions for managing the production and distribution of goods and services. These economic innovations enabled more efficient resource allocation and facilitated the specialization and trade that drove technological and cultural development. Educational systems emerged to preserve and transmit the growing body of technical knowledge required for successful agricultural production and social organization. Formal schools, apprenticeship programs, and other educational institutions developed to ensure that essential knowledge was passed down to new generations and that specialized skills were maintained and improved. Record-keeping systems developed to manage the complex information requirements of agricultural societies. Writing systems, numerical notation, and other record-keeping technologies all emerged from the practical needs of agricultural communities to track production, trade, and social relationships. These information management systems enabled much more complex social organization. Legal systems evolved to regulate the complex relationships and property issues that arose in agricultural societies. Laws, courts, enforcement mechanisms, and other legal institutions all developed to maintain order and resolve disputes in communities that were too large and complex for informal social controls to manage effectively. Environmental management became increasingly important as agricultural communities learned that their activities had significant impacts on local ecosystems. Soil conservation, water management, forest preservation, and other environmental practices all developed to maintain the natural resources that agricultural productivity depended on. Cultural identity formation became more complex as agricultural communities developed distinctive traditions, beliefs, and practices that differentiated them from neighboring groups. Language, religion, art, and other cultural markers all became more elaborate and distinctive as communities grew larger and more complex. Social mobility systems emerged to manage the movement of individuals between different social positions and occupational roles. Apprenticeship programs, military service, religious orders, and other institutions all provided pathways for individuals to change their social status and pursue different careers within agricultural societies. Public works projects became possible as agricultural communities could mobilize large amounts of labor for construction and improvement activities that benefited the entire community. Roads, irrigation systems, defensive walls, and religious monuments all required coordination and resources that only agricultural societies could provide. Cultural exchange increased dramatically as trade relationships and population density facilitated the spread of ideas, technologies, and cultural practices between different communities. This cultural diffusion accelerated innovation and created more sophisticated and diverse cultural traditions. The transformation from hunting and gathering to agricultural society was not just a change in subsistence strategy, but a complete reorganization of human social life that created the foundation for all subsequent cultural and technological development. The communities that made this transition were not simply adopting new farming techniques, they were creating entirely new forms of human organization that would shape the future of our species. These changes were driven by minds that were fully modern in their capacity for innovation, planning, and social cooperation. The people who created agricultural societies were sophisticated thinkers who developed complex solutions to unprecedented challenges and established institutions and traditions that would influence human development for thousands of years. Their legacy extends far beyond the specific agricultural techniques they developed. They created the social structures, cultural institutions, and technological foundations that made possible all subsequent human achievements. Every modern city, government, and cultural institution traces its origins back to the patient work of those early agricultural communities who first learned to live together in large permanent settlements. From these foundational social transformations, we move now to examine how Stone Age peoples understood and interacted with the natural world around them, their sophisticated ecological knowledge, and the sustainable practices that enabled human survival and expansion across diverse environments. The relationship between Stone Age peoples and their environment was not one of simple exploitation or passive adaptation, but a complex partnership based on intimate knowledge, careful observation, and sustainable practices that enabled human communities to thrive in diverse ecosystems without depleting the resources they depended on. This environmental wisdom represented one of humanity's earliest and most successful approaches to ecological management. Ecological knowledge systems developed over thousands of years as communities accumulated detailed understanding of local ecosystems, seasonal cycles, and the complex relationships between different plants, animals, and environmental factors. This knowledge encompassed not just the obvious relationships between predators and prey, or the seasonal availability of different resources, but subtle interactions that modern ecologists are only beginning to understand. Sustainable harvesting practices ensured that human activities didn't deplete the natural resources that communities depended on for long-term survival. Hunters understood how many animals could be taken from local populations without threatening their continued viability. Gatherers knew how to harvest plants in ways that maintained or even enhanced their productivity over time. These practices were based on careful observation of how human activities affected natural systems. Environmental indicators guided community decisions about when and where to engage in different subsistence activities. Changes in weather patterns, animal behavior, plant phenology, and other environmental cues all provided information that experienced individuals could interpret to predict resource availability and optimal timing for hunting, gathering, and other activities. Habitat management techniques enabled communities to enhance the productivity of their territories through strategic interventions that improved conditions for useful plants and animals. Controlled burning created and maintained grasslands that supported game animals. Selective harvesting encouraged the growth of useful plant species. These management practices demonstrated sophisticated understanding of ecological processes. Resource allocation systems balanced immediate human needs against long-term sustainability requirements through social institutions and cultural practices that regulated access to natural resources. Community leaders, traditional laws, and cultural taboos all served to prevent overexploitation and ensure that essential resources remained available for future generations. Seasonal migration patterns followed natural cycles and resource availability in ways that distributed human impact across multiple ecosystems and prevented any single area from being overwhelmed by human pressure. These migrations required detailed knowledge of environmental conditions across vast territories and careful coordination between multiple communities. Risk management strategies helped communities cope with environmental uncertainty and resource fluctuations that could threaten survival if not properly anticipated and managed. Diversified subsistence strategies, emergency food reserves, and mutual aid agreements all served to reduce the risks associated with environmental variability and unpredictable events. Environmental restoration practices enabled communities to repair damage caused by human activities or natural disasters and restore productivity to degraded areas. Soil improvement techniques, reforestation activities, and other restoration efforts demonstrated understanding of how damaged ecosystems could be rehabilitated through systematic intervention. Traditional ecological knowledge preserved and transmitted complex environmental information through oral traditions, practical demonstrations, and cultural institutions that maintained and shared essential ecological understanding across generations. This knowledge was tested and refined through constant application and represented the accumulated wisdom of countless generations of environmental observers. Conservation ethics emerged from practical experience with resource management and developed into cultural values and belief systems that emphasized human responsibility for environmental stewardship. Many Stone Age communities believed that human well-being was dependent on maintaining proper relationships with natural systems and that environmental destruction would ultimately harm human communities. Adaptive management approaches enabled communities to modify their environmental practices based on changing conditions and new information about ecosystem dynamics. Flexibility and responsiveness to environmental feedback were essential for long-term survival and required cultural systems that could accommodate change while maintaining essential knowledge and practices. Environmental monitoring systems tracked changes in local ecosystems and provided early warning of potential problems that might affect human communities. Experienced environmental observers could detect subtle changes in animal behavior, plant health, water quality, and other indicators that warned of developing problems or opportunities. Biodiversity conservation occurred naturally as communities developed practices that maintained diverse ecosystems and prevented the elimination of species that might prove useful in the future. This conservation wasn't based on abstract environmental philosophy, but on practical recognition that biological diversity provided security and resilience for human communities. Ecosystem services were recognized and protected as communities understood that natural systems provided essential services: water purification, soil formation, climate regulation, pollination, that human survival depended on. Protecting and maintaining these services was as important as direct resource harvesting for long-term community viability. Environmental knowledge integration combined information from multiple sources and observational systems to create comprehensive understanding of complex environmental processes. Individual specialists in different aspects of environmental knowledge, weather prediction, animal behavior, plant ecology, shared their expertise to create community-wide environmental intelligence. Landscape-scale thinking enabled communities to understand and manage environmental processes that operated across large areas and extended time periods. Recognition that local activities could have distant effects, and that environmental management required coordination across multiple territories, led to cooperative agreements between neighboring communities. Climate adaptation strategies helped communities adjust to long-term environmental changes and short-term climate variability through technological innovations, subsistence modifications, and settlement pattern adjustments. These adaptations demonstrated remarkable flexibility and resilience in the face of environmental challenges. Environmental education systems ensured that essential ecological knowledge was transmitted to new generations through formal and informal learning processes. Children learned environmental knowledge through direct participation in subsistence activities, observation of adult practices, and formal instruction from community experts. Restoration technologies enabled communities to repair environmental damage and enhance ecosystem productivity through sophisticated understanding of ecological processes and environmental engineering techniques. These technologies included soil improvement methods, water management systems, and vegetation management practices that improved environmental conditions. Sustainable intensification practices allowed communities to increase productivity from their territories without depleting natural resources through technological innovations and management techniques that enhanced efficiency rather than simply increasing extraction rates. These practices balanced human needs against environmental limits. The environmental wisdom of Stone Age peoples wasn't primitive thinking or simple adaptation to natural conditions. It was sophisticated environmental science that enabled sustainable human presence in diverse ecosystems for thousands of years. Their approach to environmental management demonstrated understanding of ecological principles that modern environmental science is only beginning to rediscover. Their success in living sustainably within natural systems provides valuable insights for contemporary environmental challenges. The principles they developed, careful observation, adaptive management, conservation ethics, and long-term thinking, remain essential for addressing modern environmental problems and creating sustainable relationships between human societies and natural systems. To understand Stone Age environmental practices is to see evidence of minds that understood the complex relationships between human activities and natural systems, and developed sophisticated strategies for maintaining those relationships over extended periods. Their environmental wisdom represents one of humanity's greatest intellectual achievements and provides guidance that remains relevant for contemporary environmental management. From this foundation of environmental wisdom and sustainable practices, we turn now to examine the final transformation of the Stone Age, the transition to metalworking that would mark the end of humanity's longest technological era and the beginning of historical civilization. The discovery of metalworking marked the beginning of the end of the Stone Age, though the transition was gradual and occurred at different times in different regions over thousands of years. This technological revolution didn't happen overnight, but emerged from the accumulated knowledge and experimental practices that had characterized Stone Age innovation for millennia. The minds that first learned to extract and shape metals were not primitive discoverers stumbling upon new materials, but sophisticated technologists building upon generations of experience with complex material transformations. Native metals provided the first introduction to metalworking as Stone Age peoples encountered copper, gold, and other metals that occurred naturally in relatively pure forms. These materials could be shaped through hammering and heating without requiring the complex extraction processes needed for metal ores. The working of native metals was probably an extension of stone working techniques, with artisans gradually learning that these new materials responded differently to heat and percussion. Fire technology that had been developed for cooking, tool production, and other purposes provided the foundation for metallurgy as communities learned to achieve and control the high temperatures required for metalworking. The development of more sophisticated furnaces, bellows systems, and temperature control techniques all built upon existing knowledge of fire management and materials science. Experimental approaches to metalworking emerged from the careful observation and systematic testing that had characterized Stone Age innovation for thousands of years. Early metallurgists learned to identify metal-bearing ores, developed extraction techniques, and discovered alloying processes through patient experimentation that built upon existing knowledge of material properties and transformation processes. Smelting technology represented a breakthrough that enabled the extraction of metals from ores through controlled heating processes that separated useful metals from waste materials. This technology required understanding of chemistry, engineering, and materials science that had been developing throughout the Stone Age period and represented the culmination of millennia of accumulated knowledge. Tool production using metal materials initially followed designs and techniques that had been developed for stone implements, but gradually evolved into distinctly metallic approaches that took advantage of the unique properties of metal materials. Metal tools could be shaped more precisely, maintained more easily, and modified more readily than stone implements. Trade relationships expanded dramatically as metalworking communities needed access to ore sources that were often located far from population centers. These trade networks carried not just raw materials but technological knowledge, finished products, and cultural innovations that connected distant regions and accelerated technological development. Specialized occupations emerged as metalworking required knowledge and skills that took years to develop and demanded full-time attention from practitioners. Miners, smelters, smiths, and other metallurgical specialists all represented new forms of occupational specialization that went beyond anything that had existed during the stone tool period. Social stratification increased as metalworking created new forms of wealth and status, based on control of metal resources and technological knowledge. Metal objects became symbols of prestige and power that differentiated social classes and created new forms of inequality within communities. Technological acceleration occurred as metalworking enabled the production of more effective tools that could be used to create even better tools and more sophisticated technologies. This positive feedback loop drove rapid technological development that marked the beginning of the accelerating technological change that characterizes human civilization. Environmental impacts of metalworking included deforestation for fuel, landscape modification for mining, and pollution from smelting operations that represented the first large-scale human industrial activities. These environmental changes were initially local and limited, but they established patterns of industrial environmental impact that continue to the present. Economic systems became more complex as metalworking created new forms of value, trade relationships, and economic specialization that required more sophisticated systems for managing production and distribution. Currencies, markets, and other economic institutions all developed to support the metalworking economy. Military applications of metalworking technology produced weapons that were far more effective than stone implements, and enabled new forms of warfare that would reshape political relationships between communities. Metal weapons and armor provided significant advantages that often determined the outcomes of conflicts between metalworking and non-metalworking societies. Artistic expression found new outlets in metalworking as artisans learned to create decorative objects, jewelry, and other artistic works that took advantage of the unique properties of metal materials. Metal art often combined aesthetic and functional elements in ways that hadn't been possible with stone, wood, or other traditional materials. Cultural transmission of metalworking knowledge required new forms of education and apprenticeship that could preserve and share the complex technical knowledge required for successful metallurgy. Guild systems, trade secrets, and other institutions all emerged to manage the transmission of metallurgical expertise. Regional variations in metalworking technology developed as different communities adapted metallurgical techniques to local materials, needs, and cultural preferences. These variations created distinctive metallurgical traditions that reflected local innovation and cultural identity. Quality control in metalworking required new forms of testing and standardization that ensured metal products met performance requirements and maintained consistent quality. These quality control systems often became the foundation for broader systems of manufacturing standards and trade regulations. Innovation acceleration in metalworking led to rapid development of new alloys, production techniques, and applications that demonstrated the power of systematic technological development. Bronze, iron, and steel all emerged from continued experimentation and innovation in metallurgical technology. Integration with existing technologies required careful adaptation of metalworking innovations to existing tool systems, construction techniques, and other technologies. This integration process often drove further innovation as communities learned to combine metal and traditional technologies effectively. The transition from stone to metal technology was not simply a matter of substituting new materials for old ones, but a fundamental transformation of human technological capability that enabled new forms of social organization, economic activity, and cultural expression. Communities that successfully made this transition gained significant advantages that often enabled them to dominate or displace groups that remained dependent on stone technology. Knowledge preservation became increasingly important as metalworking technology required complex, precise knowledge that had to be maintained and transmitted accurately across generations. Writing systems, formal education, and other knowledge preservation technologies all emerged partly to support the requirements of metallurgical technology. Social organization adapted to accommodate the new forms of specialization, economic relationships, and political structures that emerged from metalworking technology. These social innovations often represented the foundation for more complex forms of political organization that would characterize later civilizations. The end of the Stone Age was not a sudden break with the past, but a gradual transformation that built upon all the knowledge, skills, and social innovations that had accumulated over millions of years of human development. The metalworking communities that emerged from this transition carried forward the essential human capabilities: innovation, cooperation, environmental adaptation, and cultural transmission that had enabled survival and growth throughout the Stone Age period. Their success represented the culmination of the longest period in human technological development and the foundation for all subsequent technological achievement. Every computer, spacecraft, and modern technology traces its conceptual ancestry back through the metallurgical traditions that first emerged from Stone Age communities to the patient work of stone toolmakers who first learned that human intelligence could systematically improve the material conditions of human life. To understand the transition from stone to metal is to witness humanity's graduation from its longest educational period, the millions of years during which human minds learned to think systematically about materials, processes, and possibilities. The Stone Age wasn't humanity's infancy, but its fundamental education in the principles and practices that would enable all future achievement. From this transformation that marked the end of the Stone Age, we turn now to reflect on the lasting legacy of this remarkable period and its continuing influence on human life and consciousness. The Stone Age never truly ended. Its influence flows through every aspect of human life like an underground river, invisible but essential, shaping our thoughts, behaviors, and capabilities in ways we rarely recognize but cannot escape. To understand this legacy is to see how profoundly the experiences of our Stone Age ancestors continue to influence human nature and society, even in our modern technological world. Cognitive capabilities that evolved during the Stone Age remain the foundation of all human thinking and problem solving. The ability to plan ahead, to visualize solutions before implementing them, to learn through observation and experimentation. All of these mental skills were developed and refined through millions of years of stone tool production, hunting, gathering, and environmental adaptation. Modern engineers, scientists, and inventors use essentially the same cognitive processes that enabled Stone Age peoples to survive and thrive. Social behaviors that proved essential for Stone Age survival continue to shape human communities and relationships. Cooperation, communication, leadership, conflict resolution, and mutual aid all evolved as survival strategies that enabled small groups to function effectively in challenging environments. These social capabilities remain central to human society, even though the specific contexts in which they operate have changed dramatically. Learning systems that preserved and transmitted knowledge across generations during the Stone Age established patterns of education and cultural transmission that continue to influence how humans acquire and share knowledge. Apprenticeship, observation, practice, and gradual skill development all remain important components of human learning, even in formal educational settings. Environmental awareness that enabled Stone Age peoples to live sustainably within natural systems provides crucial insights for addressing contemporary environmental challenges. The observational skills, ecological knowledge, and conservation practices developed during the Stone Age offer guidance for creating sustainable relationships between human societies and natural ecosystems. Technological thinking that emerged from Stone Age tool production established the fundamental approaches to innovation and problem solving that underlie all subsequent technological development. The systematic observation, experimentation, and refinement that characterize stone tool production remain essential components of technological innovation in every field. Artistic expression that first appeared during the Stone Age established the creative traditions and aesthetic sensibilities that continue to influence human culture. The cave paintings, sculptures, and decorative objects created by Stone Age artists demonstrate the presence of creative capabilities that remain central to human cultural life. Spiritual beliefs that emerged from Stone Age encounters with death, natural forces, and the mysteries of existence established patterns of religious and philosophical thinking that continue to influence human spiritual life. The burial practices, ritual objects, and symbolic expressions of Stone Age peoples reveal the presence of spiritual consciousness that remains fundamental to human experience. Economic principles that governed resource allocation and exchange in Stone Age communities established the foundation for all subsequent economic systems. Concepts of property, trade, specialization, and cooperative labor all emerged during the Stone Age and continue to influence economic organization in modern societies. Political organization that enabled Stone Age communities to coordinate group activities and resolve conflicts established the foundation for all subsequent forms of governance and social organization. Leadership, decision-making, conflict resolution, and collective action all evolved as survival strategies during the Stone Age. Cultural transmission mechanisms that preserved Stone Age knowledge and traditions across generations established the patterns of cultural continuity that enable human societies to maintain their identity and knowledge base over extended periods. These transmission systems remain essential for maintaining cultural traditions and social cohesion in modern communities. Adaptation strategies that enabled Stone Age peoples to survive and thrive in diverse environments demonstrate the flexibility and resilience that remain essential human capabilities. The ability to assess changing conditions, modify behaviors, and develop new solutions to environmental challenges continues to be crucial for human survival and success. Innovation cycles that drove technological development during the Stone Age established the patterns of discovery, testing, refinement, and adoption that continue to characterize human technological progress. The same processes that led to improvements in stone tool production continue to drive innovation in modern technology. Risk management approaches that enabled Stone Age communities to cope with uncertainty and environmental challenges established patterns of prudent planning and resource management that remain important for human survival and prosperity. The ability to assess risks, prepare for contingencies, and maintain reserves continues to be essential for individual and community success. Community organization principles that enabled Stone Age groups to function effectively as integrated units established the foundation for all subsequent forms of social cooperation. The balance between individual autonomy and group solidarity, the coordination of specialized roles, and the management of resources for collective benefit all remain essential for effective community organization. Problem-solving methodologies that enabled Stone Age peoples to address the challenges of survival and environmental adaptation established the systematic approaches to analysis and solution development that continue to be fundamental to human success in every domain of activity. Knowledge integration skills that enabled Stone Age communities to combine information from multiple sources and apply it effectively to practical challenges established the interdisciplinary thinking approaches that remain essential for addressing complex problems in modern society. Resilience mechanisms that enabled Stone Age peoples to recover from setbacks and continue progressing despite difficulties established the psychological and social capabilities that remain crucial for human success in challenging circumstances. The Stone Age legacy is not simply historical interest or archaeological curiosity, it is the living foundation of human capability and the source of the essential skills and characteristics that enable human success in every generation. To understand this legacy is to recognize that modern humans are not fundamentally different from our Stone Age ancestors, but are applying the same essential capabilities to new challenges and opportunities. The minds that created the first stone tools, controlled fire, developed agriculture, and established the foundations of human civilization were not primitive predecessors to modern intelligence, but fully modern minds working with the materials and knowledge available to them. Their achievements in technology, art, social organization, and environmental management demonstrate intellectual capabilities that fully equal our own. Their legacy lives not only in the archaeological record, but in the continued presence of human capabilities and behaviors that they first developed and refined. Every act of creativity, cooperation, innovation, and adaptation draws upon the foundation they established through millions of years of patient development and accumulated wisdom. To walk in their footsteps is to recognize that we carry within ourselves the accumulated experience of countless generations of human innovation and adaptation. The Stone Age is not behind us but within us, continuing to shape our responses to the challenges and opportunities we face in our own time. And as we face the complex challenges of the modern world, environmental degradation, technological disruption, social fragmentation, we can draw upon the wisdom and capabilities that our Stone Age ancestors developed through their own encounters with survival challenges and environmental adaptation. The story of the Stone Age is not the story of a distant past, but the story of human capability itself, the long, patient development of the skills, knowledge, and social systems that enable human survival and flourishing in any environment and under any circumstances. It is the foundation story of our species and the continuing source of our strength as we face an uncertain future. In the quiet moments when we face our own challenges and uncertainties, we can remember that we carry within ourselves the wisdom of countless generations who faced their own difficulties with courage, creativity, and determination. The Stone Age never ended, because the human spirit that created it continues to live and grow within each new generation, ready to meet whatever challenges the future may hold. The wind still carries the whisper of ancient knowledge, And if we listen closely enough, we can hear the voices of our ancestors, reminding us that humans have always found ways to survive, adapt, and create something beautiful from the materials at hand. The stone tools may be gone, but the hands that made them live on in us, still shaping the world with patience, skill, and hope. But there is more to this ancient story, more layers to uncover, more connections to trace between that distant world and our own. The Stone Age was not just a prelude to civilization, it was the foundation upon which everything we recognize as human culture was built. To truly understand our place in the world, we must look deeper into the shadows of that ancient time and see how its lessons continue to echo through every aspect of modern life. The migration patterns that carried Stone Age peoples across the globe established the pathways and principles that would guide human expansion for millennia to come. These weren't random wanderings or desperate flights from danger, but carefully planned movements that followed seasonal resources, trade routes, and the gradual expansion of human knowledge about the world's geography and opportunities. The crossing of water barriers represented some of humanity's earliest engineering achievements, as Stone Age peoples developed boats, rafts, and other watercraft that enabled them to reach islands and cross rivers that would otherwise have blocked their expansion. These maritime technologies required understanding of buoyancy, stability, and navigation that demonstrated sophisticated engineering thinking and careful observation of natural phenomena. Ocean navigation skills enabled Stone Age mariners to venture far from shore and reach distant islands using techniques that remained essential to seafaring until the development of modern navigation instruments. The ability to read wind patterns, ocean currents, star positions, and other natural indicators enabled voyages that carried human populations to every habitable continent and many remote islands. Island colonization required complete technological and social systems that could function independently in isolated environments. The groups that successfully established communities on remote islands had to bring with them all the knowledge, tools, and social organization necessary for survival in environments that offered both unique opportunities and unprecedented challenges. Adaptation to diverse climates drove the development of technologies and cultural practices that enabled human survival in environments ranging from Arctic tundra to tropical rainforests to arid deserts. Each environment demanded specific solutions to survival challenges, leading to the development of diverse human cultures that were perfectly adapted to local conditions. Population dynamics during the Stone Age followed patterns that reflected both environmental constraints and technological capabilities. Hunter-gatherer populations remained relatively small and stable for long periods, but agricultural communities could support much larger populations that grew more rapidly and created the demographic foundation for complex societies. Language evolution accelerated during the Stone Age as increasingly complex technologies and social organizations demanded more sophisticated communication systems. The development of abstract vocabulary, grammatical structures, and symbolic communication capabilities all emerged from the practical requirements of Stone Age life. Cultural variation across different Stone Age communities created the diversity of human traditions that continues to characterize our species. Different environments, resources, and historical experiences led to the development of distinctive cultural traditions that reflected both universal human capabilities and local adaptation requirements. Genetic adaptation occurred as human populations spread into diverse environments and faced different selective pressures that influenced both physical and behavioral characteristics. These genetic changes were generally subtle but helped optimize human capabilities for success in specific environmental conditions. Trade network expansion during the later Stone Age created the first global economy as communities exchanged goods, ideas, and technologies across vast distances. These networks carried not just physical objects, but also knowledge, cultural practices, and innovations that accelerated development across wide regions. Technological diffusion accelerated as trade networks and migration patterns enabled rapid spread of innovations between distant communities. A useful invention developed in one region could reach communities thousands of miles away within generations, creating acceleration in technological development that wouldn't be matched again until modern times. Knowledge synthesis occurred as communities combined information and techniques from multiple sources to create innovations that transcended local traditions. This cross-cultural fertilization drove technological and cultural development that was more rapid and sophisticated than would have been possible in isolated communities. Conflict and cooperation patterns established during the Stone Age created the foundation for all subsequent human political relationships. The balance between competition and collaboration that characterized Stone Age communities established principles of diplomacy, warfare, and alliance that continue to influence international relations. Resource management challenges faced by Stone Age communities established the foundation for understanding the relationship between human activities and environmental sustainability. The lessons learned about carrying capacity, resource depletion, and environmental management remain relevant for addressing contemporary environmental problems. Social innovation during the Stone Age created the institutional foundations for all subsequent human social organization, kinship systems, leadership structures, conflict resolution mechanisms, and other social innovations established patterns that continue to influence human communities. Educational systems that preserved and transmitted Stone Age knowledge across generations established the foundation for all subsequent human learning and cultural transmission. The principles of apprenticeship, observation, practice, and gradual skill development remain central to human education in every field. Artistic traditions that emerged during the Stone Age established the creative foundations that continue to influence human cultural expression. The cave paintings, sculptures, music, and decorative arts of Stone Age communities demonstrate aesthetic sensibilities and creative capabilities that remain central to human culture. Spiritual exploration that began during the Stone Age established the foundation for all subsequent human religious and philosophical development. The questions about meaning, mortality, and transcendence that Stone Age peoples grappled with remain central to human spiritual experience. Medical knowledge that accumulated during the Stone Age through careful observation and experimentation established the foundation for all subsequent healing traditions. The herbal remedies, surgical techniques, and therapeutic practices developed by Stone Age healers demonstrated sophisticated understanding of human anatomy and physiology. Astronomical observation that enabled Stone Age communities to track seasons, navigate, and create calendars established the foundation for all subsequent scientific understanding of celestial phenomena. The ability to predict eclipses, track planetary movements, and understand seasonal cycles demonstrated sophisticated mathematical and observational capabilities. Mathematical concepts that emerged from Stone Age practical requirements established the foundation for all subsequent mathematical development. Counting systems, geometric principles, and proportional relationships all developed to support technological and social requirements during the Stone Age. Engineering principles that enabled Stone Age construction projects established the foundation for all subsequent architectural and engineering achievements. Understanding of structural stability, load distribution, and materials properties all emerged from practical experience with Stone Age construction challenges. Agricultural experimentation that began during the later Stone Age established the foundation for all subsequent food production systems. The selective breeding of crops, development of farming techniques, and creation of storage systems all emerged from careful observation and experimentation by Stone Age communities. Domestication processes that transformed wild animals into domestic species during the Stone Age established the foundation for all subsequent animal husbandry and agricultural development. The techniques for breeding, training, and managing domestic animals were all developed through patient experimentation and observation. Urban planning concepts that emerged in the earliest Stone Age settlements established the foundation for all subsequent city design and development. Principles of space allocation, traffic flow, waste management, and community organization all emerged from practical experience with managing large settled populations. political organization that evolved during the Stone Age, established the foundation for all subsequent governmental and administrative systems. Concepts of leadership, representation, law, and collective decision-making all emerged from the practical requirements of managing Stone Age communities. Economic principles that govern Stone Age trade and resource allocation established the foundation for all subsequent economic systems. Concepts of value, exchange, specialization, and market organization all emerged from practical experience with managing Stone Age economies. Legal systems that emerged to regulate Stone Age communities established the foundation for all subsequent law and justice systems. Concepts of rights, obligations, punishment, and dispute resolution all emerged from practical experience with maintaining order in Stone Age societies. Military organization that developed during Stone Age conflicts established the foundation for all subsequent warfare and defense systems. Strategies, tactics, weapons, and organizational structures all emerged from practical experience with Stone Age conflicts and security challenges. Diplomatic practices that enabled Stone Age communities to manage relationships with neighbors established the foundation for all subsequent international relations and conflict resolution. Techniques for negotiation, alliance formation, and peaceful dispute resolution all emerged from Stone Age political experience. Transportation systems that enabled Stone Age communities to move goods and people across long distances established the foundation for all subsequent transportation development. Roads, vehicles, navigation techniques, and logistics systems all emerged from Stone Age transportation requirements. Communication systems that enabled Stone Age communities to share information across distances established the foundation for all subsequent information technology development. Signaling systems, message transmission, and record-keeping all emerged from Stone Age communication requirements. Manufacturing systems that enabled Stone Age communities to produce goods efficiently established the foundation for all subsequent industrial development. Production techniques, quality control, specialization, and distribution systems all emerged from Stone Age manufacturing experience. Environmental management practices that enabled Stone Age communities to live sustainably within natural systems established the foundation for all subsequent environmental science and conservation efforts. Understanding of ecological relationships, resource management, and environmental restoration all emerged from Stone Age environmental experience. The scope and sophistication of Stone Age achievement becomes more apparent the deeper we look into the archaeological record, and the more carefully we analyze the evidence of Stone Age technologies, social systems, and cultural practices. Far from being a primitive prelude to civilization, the Stone Age was a period of remarkable innovation and development that established the foundation for every subsequent human achievement. The problems that Stone Age peoples faced, how to survive in diverse environments, how to organize complex societies, how to transmit knowledge across generations, how to balance individual needs with community requirements, are the same fundamental challenges that continue to face human communities in every period of history. The solutions they developed remain relevant and valuable for addressing contemporary problems. The Stone Age represents humanity's longest period of technological and social development, spanning millions of years during which human capabilities evolved from simple tool use to complex technological systems that could support large settled populations. This development wasn't linear or uniform, but it was continuous and cumulative, with each generation building upon the achievements of their predecessors. The archaeological record reveals the presence of minds that were fully modern in their capacity for innovation, creativity, and problem-solving. Stone Age peoples were not primitive humans struggling with crude technologies, but sophisticated individuals who developed complex solutions to challenging problems using the materials and knowledge available to them. Their achievements in technology, social organization, artistic expression, and environmental management demonstrate intellectual capabilities that equal our own. The differences between Stone Age and modern peoples lie not in mental capacity, but in accumulated knowledge and available technologies. Given the same educational opportunities and technological resources, Stone Age individuals would be indistinguishable from modern humans in their capabilities and achievements. The cultural diversity that characterized Stone Age communities established the foundation for the rich variety of human traditions that continue to characterize our species. Different environments and historical experiences led to the development of distinctive approaches to survival, social organization, and cultural expression that demonstrated the flexibility and adaptability of human intelligence. The sustainable practices that enabled Stone Age communities to live successfully within natural systems for thousands of years provide valuable guidance for addressing contemporary environmental challenges. Their approach to resource management, environmental monitoring, and ecosystem maintenance offers insights that remain relevant for creating sustainable relationships between human societies and natural systems. The social innovations that enabled Stone Age communities to cooperate effectively in challenging circumstances provide valuable insights for addressing contemporary social challenges. Their approaches to leadership, conflict resolution, education, and community organization offer guidance that remains relevant for building effective human communities. The technological principles that guided Stone Age innovation continue to underlie all subsequent technological development. The systematic observation, experimentation, and refinement that characterize Stone Age tool production remain essential components of technological innovation in every field. The artistic and spiritual achievements of Stone Age communities demonstrate the presence of aesthetic and transcendent concerns that remain central to human experience. Their cave paintings, sculptures, musical instruments, and burial practices reveal minds capable of creating meaning and beauty that transcends immediate survival requirements. The educational systems that preserved and transmitted Stone Age knowledge across generations established patterns of learning and cultural transmission that remain essential for human development. The apprenticeship, observation, and gradual skill development that characterize Stone Age education continue to be important components of human learning in every field. To understand the Stone Age is to understand the foundation of human capability and the source of the essential characteristics that enable human success in every generation. The Stone Age legacy lives not only in the archaeological record, but in the continued presence of human capabilities and behaviors that were first developed and refined during this remarkable period. The transition from the Stone Age to subsequent periods of human history was not a replacement of primitive capabilities with advanced ones, but a continuation and extension of the same essential human abilities that had enabled survival and development throughout the Stone Age period. Modern humans use the same fundamental cognitive processes, social skills, and creative capabilities that enabled Stone Age success. The challenges facing contemporary human societies, environmental degradation, social inequality, technological disruption, and resource management are variations on the same fundamental problems that Stone Age communities successfully addressed for thousands of years. Their approaches to these challenges offer valuable guidance for creating sustainable and equitable solutions to contemporary problems. The Stone Age story is not just historical background or archaeological curiosity, but the foundational narrative of human capability and the continuing source of the wisdom and skills that enable human survival and flourishing in any environment and under any circumstances. It is the deepest layer of human experience and the most essential component of human identity. In our modern technological world, it's easy to lose sight of these ancient foundations and to assume that human capability is somehow separate from or independent of the long development that occurred during the Stone Age. But every computer program, every scientific discovery, every work of art, and every act of human cooperation draws upon capabilities that were first developed and refined during the Stone Age. The Stone Age artisans who patiently shaped stone into tools were developing the same systematic thinking that enables modern engineering. The Stone Age communities that learned to cooperate in hunting and gathering expeditions were developing the same social skills that enable modern organizations. The Stone Age artists who painted cave walls were developing the same creative capabilities that produce modern art and literature. To recognize this continuity is to understand that we are not separate from or superior to our Stone Age ancestors, but are their direct inheritors and the continuing expression of the same essential human capabilities that they first developed. We carry their achievements within us, and our own achievements are extensions of their patient work across millions of years of human development. The Stone Age never ended, because the human capabilities it created continue to live and grow within each new generation. Every child who learns to use tools is recapitulating the same developmental process that occurred during the Stone Age. Every adult who solves problems through systematic observation and experimentation is using capabilities that were first developed during the Stone Age. The winds that blow across the modern landscape still carry the echoes of Stone Age knowledge, and if we listen carefully, we can hear the voices of our ancestors reminding us that human survival and flourishing depend not on the complexity of our technologies, but on the wisdom and cooperation that have always been the foundation of human success. The stone tools may be gone, replaced by more sophisticated implements, but the hands that made them live on in us, still shaping the world with the same patience, skill, and hope that enabled our ancestors to transform simple stones into the tools that built human civilization. The Stone Age is not behind us but within us, continuing to provide the foundation for everything we achieve and everything we hope to become. And so, as we continue our own journey through time, we carry with us the accumulated wisdom of countless generations who faced their own challenges with courage, creativity, and determination. We are not alone in our struggles because we are part of an unbroken chain of human achievement that stretches back to the very beginning of our species and forward into whatever future we choose to create. The Stone Age teaches us that humans have always been capable of extraordinary achievements when they work together with patience, wisdom, and hope. This lesson remains as relevant today as it was millions of years ago, and it will continue to guide human development as long as our species endures. The stone tools may be museum pieces, but the spirit that created them remains alive and active in every human heart, ready to meet whatever challenges the future may hold with the same determination and ingenuity that carried our ancestors from the first shaped stone to the threshold of the modern world.